Welcome to the Horror Hangout, a podcast where film fans watch the best and worst horror films of all time and talk about them. My name is Ben Errington, and I'm joined by a very special guest today. Terrelle Graham is a film critic, YouTuber, and podcast host of the Mind of the Escapist podcast. Welcome to the show, Terrelle.
Thank you for inviting me on. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to our discussion.
You're most welcome. And this has been a long time coming, hasn't it?
It has, yeah. Well, like we were saying before we got started, that we've been communicating through social media for so long, but this is the first time we're actually having that proper interaction.
Yeah, exactly. And having followed you on social media for like a long time, you've always got an opinion about horror films in particular, but you've always got an opinion about films that I'm always interested in. It's always an opinion that makes me go, okay, all right, or I've never thought about it like that, or I'm always willing to like listen to what you've got to say. Sometimes people are just like firing out opinions left, right, and center.
Yeah.
Like, I've heard it before.
Yeah.
But as soon as you put your opinion out, like, okay, I'm ready to listen. We got to get this guy on.
I'd say the same with you. It's when you get like certain people that you kind of like, even though like whether they might disagree or agree with the same, like you might have different opinions, you're kind of always intrigued by what brought them to that opinion, and you kind of know,
oh yeah,
whatever you hear, it's like, a different perspective that you can kind of respect.
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna have any different opinions on the film today, though.
Yeah.
I don't think that's gonna happen. But yeah, I thought we'd sort of like start pretty much at the beginning. I know you've been doing film criticism for like for a while, for quite a few years, starting on. Was it starting on YouTube, or did you do?
So when I was 16, like it's really it's like a really random story because it was never really planned. But I was 16 years old. I think what it really stemmed from really actually was in school. I had friends in school that I could talk to about films and that we would talk to about. But I kind of have this thing where it's like when I have passions, I was like I almost like have to just like express them in some way. And I feel like those conversations with friends just wasn't enough. Like, I need to let out more. So funnily enough, back when I was 16, I had the PlayStation, the PlayStation camera for the PS3. And that's all I had as a camera at the time. And I was like, I'm just going to set this up and just sit down and talk about a film and record it and just put it on YouTube, just throw it on YouTube, see what happens. And I didn't really expect anything to happen from it. But I remember when I started uploading videos, and then people would comment on them and respond. I'm like, oh, people are actually listening and they're actually responding. And now I'm talking to like someone across the internet about this film, and I just kept doing it, and then it started to like build up an audience, and it was a hobby. But then after a while, I started to realize how like actually this is like a career path. Like this is something that that's a passion that I can kind of just continue to do and actually get things out of it. And like certain contacts I received through doing that, because I was reviewing video games as well, and I think the first professional kind of contact I got was from Activision.
Nice.
In regards to video games, and they started sending me out video games. I thought, oh, I can actually prolong this and make something out of it. And I didn't know about the YouTube partner scheme at the time or anything like that as well. And when I started to receive ad revenue and money from it at 16, I was like, oh, you could actually make money off YouTube. and then it kind of just went from there. But I did that so I started that in 2010, and I'd say I remained very consistent with it until at least like 2018, I want to say. And then I kind of slowed down with it. And then what I did at that time was transition into written form of reviews on like a little blog that I had, which I did for a few years. And then I kind of went back and forth between YouTube and that. And then podcast wise, I started that this year, but then that's been something that's been on my mind for a long, long time. Like, because I feel like I like the long form aspect of podcasts where you can just kind of have a discussion and just talk for a long extended period of time. And I find them really interesting to listen to as well for that reason, because it's much more like conversational and you can really get the information out. So I've kind of been on a long journey with it all.
A long journey, but like had a decent amount of success with it as well. Like I've seen that you've been to like loads of premieres for various things, and then like a clip of yours was included in like a reaction video for like a Marvel trailer.
Yeah, that's probably one of the highlights of this whole journey I've done, is because when was this now? This was before Infinity War came out. So I think this was...
That's right, yeah.
Was that 2018? Yeah. I got contacted, was it by email? By this woman, and she said, oh, I'm from Disney's marketing, blah, 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 blah. We would like to use a clip from your YouTube video. And I kind of looked at it. I remember I was in work when I read the email, And I kind of looked at it and then just put my phone away because I thought, oh, that's just like that's not real. That's a load of nonsense. And then I can't remember if she like messaged me something else. And then there just came a point where I kind of looked at it again. I was like, I had that realization, like, wait, this is real because she's asking for like my details to send me money. I think they pay me £300 for that. And what it
Oh
was
wow,
one of my
okay. Oh
trailer
nice.
reaction videos I did. So what they were doing for the marketing, there was this trailer that they released to kind of thank the fans leading up to the release of Infinity War,
Yeah, yeah,
the
I
whole of
remember
the
that. Yeah.
MCU, and
Mm.
they like took clips from different YouTube videos over the years of like the whole span of the MCU and put it into this one trailer, which was then teasing the official trailer for Infinity War.
Mm.
And it was my Guardians of the Galaxy trailer reaction video I did in 2014. It's literally just a 1 second clip of me like smiling at a particular
Yeah,
scene in that reaction that they then cut and put into that Marvel trailer. And I got £300 for it. And it was that type of thing where
one
I
second's
kind of
work.
didn't fully believe, yeah, didn't fully believe it until the trailer released, and I watched it and just saw myself there, and I was like, "This is insane," because it's like this trailer. I think now the trailer on YouTube had like 6 million views, and it's like
Oh
that's
wow, okay.
just
Mm.
crazy to see yourself in a trailer like that. Like I'm actually in a Disney official trailer for the
You're
MCU, which is
you're
kind of
officially
wild.
part of the MCU.
Yeah, it's like I'm immortalized through the MCU marketing.
That's cool. I mean, so obviously it's like you've managed to get a lot of opportunities like out of it as well. Like I guess so you're not doing YouTube too much these days. You're more just
Yeah,
focusing
not
on the
as much.
podcast.
So last year I made a fresh YouTube channel, which was called Mind of the Escapist, which is the same name as the podcast. And my idea with that then was to, right, I'm going to go straight back into YouTube and do it properly again. But then what I found is just recording videos. When I was younger, it was easier time wise, but recording videos, setting it up, editing, and all that, like, was taking up so much time. And
Mm.
I kind of just camera wise wasn't feeling being on camera as much as I used to. Whereas when I was younger, I could just do it, don't care
Mm.
how I look, da 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 da. And as I got older, it's like, oh, this is it's a lot more effort than it used to be.
Yeah.
And I don't know where I'm gonna find the time to do it all. So that kind of slowed down pretty quickly as I was doing it. But it was like I still had that itch within me to talk about films and
Mm.
express. And then that's when I started to myself listen to podcasts more. And I'm like, actually, this is the perfect thing for me because I can sit in front of a microphone and talk all day long. And
Yeah.
it just goes on. And then just
So
and I like for me, I don't know if I have like this OCD thing, but I like the idea of, and it's the same with YouTube, but I think in podcasts it's a bit different, of just having a log of like review, like even that I can go back to, like, so once
yeah.
you build up over time, it's like, oh, this film comes out. Oh, what did I think of this film when it came out? Oh,
Oh
let me
yeah.
listen to
I'm
this,
with you on that.
and
I'm with you on that. Yeah,
I
definitely.
really like that aspect of it. Yeah.
Do you use Letterbox quite a lot as well, don't you?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I think
That's another
that's the
thing.
perfect like way of me like going like after I watched John Wick Chapter 4, I was like, ah, how did I rank the rest of them again? Like I'm almost like
Yeah.
challenging myself to remember. And like it's great to see like what year and what date you watched it as well. I mean, I rewatched Evil Dead 2013 recently, and I was like, when did I last see that? It feels like a long time ago, but then I can literally see how many times I've watched it in the last 8-9 years, which
Yeah, I
is
love that app. It's like that is like I saw this tweet earlier actually that was saying like about talking about the elite apps on social media right now, and it
yeah.
had just TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter, and I was thinking, no, Letterbox is the one. Like that is the
Letterboxd
'cause
is number
you can just
one.
get lost in that app. You can just open it up and just fall down a wormhole of like films. You'll
Oh,
click on one director's name, see this film,
yeah.
click that, read
I'm
this
the
review.
worst. I'm the worst for like I really shouldn't, and I probably shouldn't even admit to it. But I'm the worst for opening the app like as soon as the film starts because I'll see a name like on the opening credits and I'll go, hang on a minute, I know
Yeah,
that is. And they're like look,
literally. And then like
looking at
a habit I have as well is like if I'm watching a film, especially horror films, I love to see the reviews on there for, especially if I'm watching like really obscure ones. Like I've watched a lot of Italian giallo films. Like that's one of my favorite subgenres. And like I had this phase a couple years ago where I was spent a couple months like really just diving through loads of them and going like filmmaker by filmmaker. And I just found it so satisfying to like watch those films and then go straight onto Letterboxd and see what
yeah.
everyone else is thinking about these films, and then you discover new ones through there, and it's I think that app's brilliant. Like it's
I watched you from afar doing that. Sounds a bit sinister, but like on Twitter and then like on Letterboxd, I saw you like doing the giallo thing because
yeah.
um we're doing a giallo film next week actually with a director of a short giallo film. So but it's always been one of those genres that I've not dived into as deeply as perhaps I would like to. So I'm definitely very interested to like find out more. But we're doing Tenebrae.
Oh, that is one of my favorites.
Oh
That
wow, okay. We've
yeah.
got
Have
you
you
in for the
seen it
wrong
yet, or
episode. No,
have
I've
you?
not seen it yet. So this
No,
week
no.
I'll
So
be watching it.
that's one of those ones where through that phase of time, I think it was in 2020 when I just went through loads of them. And Dario Argento is like, I'd say he's probably my favorite horror director.
Yeah.
And that's the one where I liked it when I first watched it. I think I've seen it about 3 times now. But I liked it when I first watched it. And then you know when you like watch a film and then over time, the more you think about it, it kind of just grows on you. And then you watch it again and you're like, is it as good as I remember? And then you're like, oh, I like it even more. And then you watch it again, it's like, no, I still like it even more. And like that's a film I've been meaning to watch like sometime over the past couple of months. I haven't got around to it yet because I bought the 4K restoration they did of it, but I haven't watched the 4K version yet. But I do really like that film. I'll definitely be tuning in.
We've got you in for the wrong episode, man.
Well, any other Giallo films you do, I'll be happy to come back on. But I'll definitely be checking out what you think of that because
that's definitely like this. Despite the fact we're like approaching 300 episodes, it's weird how some subgenres we kind of haven't covered quite as much as others, and that is definitely one of them. So we're trying to correct that like within the next.
I think that's what I love about
months.
Horror in general is there's so more than any other genre I can think of. There's so many subgenres that branch off, like just so many, and like you could watch 100 horror films like around one specific subgenre, and there'll be just another subgenre with another 200 that you've never seen that's completely different, and like you can always find something different, weird and different in horror, and I think that's why I feel
like this podcast is probably going to go on forever because
yeah
you might tell people, we've done like 300 episodes. Oh, you must be getting pretty close to completing horror. No,
not even close.
Not even scratch the surface of the genre. And then also like talking about your podcast again, it's strictly like a solo podcast as well, right?
Yeah, so like starting out, I've started it as a solo one. I as it goes on, I do want to start welcoming guests onto it, and then potentially, depending on who I might find, maybe even having like a co-host as well. But just starting out, I thought, let me just get this started myself anyway, and then see where it goes. Because it's one of those things that, once again, what I like about it is I've started it now, and it's like I see this now going on for years. So it's like there's that kind of I've done the first step, but like I can see it evolving over time, and I plan to stick with it for years.
It's not exclusively horror either, is it? So clearly,
so it's a mix.
It has the potential.
Film and video games trying to cover on there, and even manga and anime as well. But then what I realized very quickly, having said all of that, is the amount of time you have to record an episode and to upload an episode, and the myriad of things there is to talk about. Like Dead Space. I know you played Dead Space. I was meaning to review that remake back in January. I still haven't got around to reviewing that one there yet because I just got caught up with other reviews I'm doing.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think maybe we
Resident Evil as well. Yeah, I have. I haven't even finished Resident Evil 4 remake yet, but
you've not?
All of those I still plan to review all of that as well, but get to it in due course.
I've been on it. I think I'm on my third playthrough now, and I don't usually do that, but I don't know. It's just something about this game where I'm just like, maybe I could try it on a higher difficulty. Maybe I could try it on I think there's like professional mode. And now I've unlocked like an unlimited rocket launcher. So it's just fun, you know? It doesn't even feel like I'm necessarily playing the game through again. I'm just
just enjoy that. And I think I found because where did I get to in that game? I got up to the part where you basically where you just find Ashley. But what I found with the Resident Evil remake and the Dead Space one is both of those games have like really good gameplay loops where like the actual core gameplay of those games is just really addicting and fun. Just the gameplay, the weapons you get given, and I think seeing those two games come back now and see how strong they are gameplay wise, it kind of makes a lot of the newer games that are coming out around now. It makes you realize actually, these older games were doing it like really well back then.
Did you play the Callisto Protocol as well?
Yeah,
you did.
And I did.
the less you say about it, the best. Is it just like Dead Space, but not good?
Yeah, and with me, I didn't realize how much melee focus it was going to be. So when I first started playing it, and like, have you played it at all? Or
no, I haven't.
No, so it's very melee focused, like almost like I don't say like a beat 'em up game, but like that primary thing you're doing in that game is dodging the enemy with the left stick by like literally swaying right and left, and then countering them with like a punch or with your baton or smacking them. But it's just a really poorly made game. Like I feel like when I first played it, what it felt like is it felt like a game that was in like an alpha phase. Like it didn't feel
Oh,
like it
okay.
had gone
Yeah.
past the QA testing yet. And I
They
bought
still
it
release
thinking,
games like that, don't they?
yeah, it's crazy because I bought it thinking, right, I'm gonna play this just this weekend and trade it back in. But it was such a bad state, I couldn't get through. I had to put it down for a few weeks, go back to it, and then what I eventually ended up doing is actually turning the difficulty down to easy because it was such a broken game that like playing it on normal was just frustrating because it's
Yeah.
the way the combat is and the way you move.
Mm.
If you got one enemy, you can kind of get away with it. But as soon as like multiple enemies are on screen, you just get blindsided by enemies behind you, and you can't properly like navigate the gameplay to fight multiple people. So
Yeah,
very frustrating.
I saw that they added something like a patch or something saying it was limb
Dismemberment. Yeah, I saw
leave
that.
dismemberment mode. I was like, hang on a minute, that's literally
Yeah.
exactly what makes Dead Space
Dead Space. And
That's
it's
exactly
come
it.
in a patch like 6 months later, and it's like
Oh man, well,
it's like the state of video games right now when it comes to just patching things in.
I'm kind of glad I missed that then. So with your podcast, how do you find it doing like a solo podcast thing? Because when I've been listening, this is kind of something that I was curious about. Because when I do a podcast with somebody, like I'm bouncing off of people and I'm constantly like the conversation is constantly going. Do you tend to
Yeah.
just record and just whatever comes out is the episode? Do you tend to like
Yeah,
script
so
it,
like
or...
I think what helps me with it doing it solo is I think to me it's almost the same as what I was doing on YouTube in a way, just without my face attached.
Yeah.
Where it's that thing where I'm just kind of talking to myself, which was when I first started doing YouTube was a really weird thing to wrap my head around because it's like I'm just talking to a camera, like I'm just looking at a camera, looking at myself, and just chatting. But what I find is I used to do it like kind of just freely with the first few like attempts of recording episodes. Then I realized actually I need a few notes here to keep myself focused because otherwise I just rattle on and then I start to lose track of what I've covered and what I haven't covered. But yeah, so for me, it almost feels like just doing a YouTube video in that sense. So I kind of, but then sometimes I do feel like it'd be nice to actually have a discussion like with someone right now about this particular thing in this episode, and that's why I think I'm gonna start bringing people on and doing things like that as well. Because
it's impressive though. Like it was
two
one of
different dynamics.
Yeah, sorry, man. Yeah, all I was going to say, I think it's impressive because I can't begin to imagine like sort of recording this on my own. I feel like I'd start talking and I go, no.
Yeah, you do get that sometimes though.
Again.
You like you kind of like pause and it's like, wait, did I just rattle on about that point for 5 minutes when it could have been done in 1 minute? And then you kind of like listen to it back and it's like, oh no, that's all right.
It's really
what I do find the interesting thing is no matter how much I feel in the moment that I've just rattled on, and sometimes like I'll record a whole episode, be 30 minutes, finish it and feel like, did I say anything of like, does that make sense what I've just said?
Yeah.
Whenever I listen to it back, it actually does. But it's just when you get, I feel like when you're talking to yourself for so long, you start to think, does that even make sense? But yeah, it does in the end.
Yeah, well, that's good. Well, but as I was going to say, it's really interesting to see like how your film criticism has developed from, or like transitioned, sorry, from like one thing to the next, and how that's worked out. I think it's really good. So I was going to talk about your history of Evil Dead first, but I thought the first thing you mentioned is the fact that you did attend the Evil Dead Rise UK premiere in London at the Prince Charles.
Prince Charles,
yeah, Prince Charlie. And Lee Cronin was there as well.
Yeah,
he was attending.
he did a Q&A after the film as well. But that cinema is one of my favorites in the UK now. I've been there a few times. I think the first time, I've always been aware of it, but the first time I went there was actually Halloween last year, and I watched Dario Argento's Suspiria in Halloween down there.
Wow. Oh wait, so I was going to say were you there for Fright Fest, but that was before Halloween, wasn't it?
Yeah, so the Fright Fest screening I had, because I did actually watch Dario Argento's newest film, I think it's called Dark Glasses. I watched that at Fright Fest. That was in Cineworld on Leicester Square when I saw that screening.
Oh yeah, that's right, isn't it? Oh yeah, sorry, I was
and he was actually in attendance, which blew my mind because like
what?
Dario Argento, with him being like my favorite horror filmmaker, he's one of those people that I just never in my mind would I ever consider I'd be sat in the same room as him. And to see him kind of, and I was like a few rows from the front as well, so to see him come out and introduce the film and then talk a bit about it, and he had his translator there, it's like wow. Like I always get that thing when I see like celebrities, especially like people I admire creatively, where you look at them, I'm like, the things he must have seen, like the experiences this man in front of me has had. And I think of
Go
all
see
these
some
films I've
shit.
watched, all the shots, all the gore, all the thing, and it's like it's all come from this mind. Like this man right in front of me right now has done all of that, and he's stood right here, and it's kind of crazy.
It's fascinating, but it's kind of like I feel like if I met somebody like that, I just wouldn't know what to say.
Yeah, he just frees up.
I'd end up saying something ridiculous like, "Oh, the Suspiria was all right, wasn't it?"
Yeah,
like that.
just keep it real casual, super casual. Yeah,
keep it too casual. Do you know what I mean? Almost too casual.
Yeah, but yeah, the Evil Dead that experience was really good because I find like in the UK for America, whenever I hear about or see clips of American cinemas, they're very loud and they're very audible with their reactions. Sometimes a bit too much. Whereas in the UK, I feel like they're just very quiet most of the time. But then when you go to these type of premiere events, like watching this film with a crowd of people that love Evil Dead, and it was just a lot of cheers, a lot of gasps, a lot of laughs. Talking about the title card of Evil Dead Rise, like when that came up, everyone was like, I think a few people were like applauding, and like you just the energy you get from those type of environments. And I think the Evil Dead Rise is like a perfect film for that type of environment.
I feel like that. Yeah, if I was just watching it in a normal cinema with normal moviegoers, if people were cheering and stuff, I might be like, all right, all right, pipe down. But I think if you go to an actual like premiere event and it's with an actual crowd of people, I mean, especially if the director's there, I think you've got to audibly
kind of give him some feedback.
Give us some feedback because it must feel amazing, you know, especially like moments like that which you've probably pored over for months on end, just like how are we going to make this title card effective. And that was one of the sequences from the trailer which I was the most curious about as well, because I felt like it all takes place in this like high-rise building, this apartment complex. What's this scene on the lake? I was just
like what's going on there?
I didn't know if it's going to be like an opening scene, like a cold open, or whether it was going to be something that like interweaved into the story somehow. I was really fascinated by that.
Very intriguing.
I think it's one of probably Evil Dead Rise might be the trailer I've seen the most as well. That's another thing I was worried about with the film. You know, when you've seen a trailer so much,
so many times.
Yeah, I think like every time I've been.
Sorry, carry on.
I was just going to say every. Oh no! Thank you.
Yeah. So trailer-wise, I tend to avoid horror trailers, and I'm usually pretty good at it. But then when it's something like Evil Dead, it's like, no, I need to see what's going on here. Like I can't avoid the Evil Dead trailer. So I watched it, and like I do that thing where I watch it and then I try and like forget about it. I try and like erase as much as the imagery out of my mind. But I think I did end up seeing the trailer for this quite a few times. To the point where, and I saw a lot of the Instagram kind of trailers that they put up for it as well.
Well,
it just had me intrigued.
We did a reaction, and we did one of those things where you scrub through looking at every little tiny detail, which is good. But at the same time, like in a way, you're a bit like, oh, I've seen it all. And every time that trailer came on in cinemas since then, I would just put my head down or just look at my, just like quietly look at my phone, just like I don't want to see the trailer again, because I am like you, like I don't know what it says about my mental state, but I'm really good at forgetting things. Like if I've seen a trailer, I can pretty much like someone could tell me a spoiler about a film, and I could almost convince myself to just forget that. They'd tell me a major spoiler, and then when I do see it again, I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't already know this. But
I know what you mean. Actually, like I can kind of do the same type of thing. It's like it's like because sometimes people just say things that aren't true in the film as well. So like sometimes people think they're joking by just say, because I hate when people do that, to be honest, when they try and give you a fake spoiler. I'm like, yeah, but now because the way that my brain works, I'm gonna be like analyzing, looking for that in the film, and but then eventually I do tend to forget. I feel like if I give myself like 2 weeks, it's gone. It's like out of my head and I forget.
Etch a sketch. That's what I compare my brain
to.
Just give it a shake and it's gone. Yeah, I know what you mean. I've got no time for fake spoilers. God, what are people playing doing that? I think sometimes people don't realize what a spoiler is, though. Like they'll say, this isn't really a spoiler, but, and then major spoiler. And you're like, how is that not a spoiler? That's a huge spoiler. Like
we were saying before, even with the title card, because you said you've seen the title card before you saw the film.
Yeah.
And like for me, for a title card in general is not a spoiler, but for the type of title card that this is, seeing it before my eyes is a spoiler because it's like it's part of that experience. Like,
it's the experience, but that's we will get into it obviously when we talk about the film. But the sound, like the sound design when that title card appears as well. Like, I mean, I love it when a film gives you goosebumps, but like in the best possible way. It's just I was just like, whoa, this is This is
So you're
insane.
about to go on a ride.
You are about to go on a ride, exactly. And then also, like, yeah, we'll save it. So I mean, and I guess the last thing I wanted to say, and I guess we will cover this a bit with what we've been watching, because you said you've been watching Evil Dead movies, but like, what is your history with the franchise? Have you always been a fan? Is it something that you saw when you were really young, or have you sort of discovered it when you were a bit older?
Yeah, so evil. What I find, and this is something I love about horror. Whenever you speak to people about horror, because everyone, I mean, I guess it goes for everything, but with horror in particular, everyone has like that timeline of horror, their like journey through the genre, and like when they first started, and when they watched this classic film, and when they experienced. And Evil Dead for me was one of the films that were like at the start of that for me. I think some of the earliest horror films I can remember watching were like The Exorcist, Halloween, Final Destination, Saw, and Evil Dead was somewhere in amongst that. So I think I was like 12 years old, I want to say. Because there was,
okay.
when I was 12, I started using birthday money, well, getting my parents to use my birthday money to buy horror DVD box sets. And I remember I had the Evil Dead one. And for a long time, like back then, for that early phase of me being a horror fan, when I was kind of being introduced to the genre, the first Evil Dead was like my favorite horror film, and it was for a very long time. My like absolute favorite one, and I think I was just drawn to, because for me it's that quintessential kind of cabin in the woods type of film, and I was just drawn to that. I always remember like the pencil in the ankle scene from the first. I always remember that being like the thing that always like kind of just made me go, and like, of course, like Bruce Campbell and just the effects and the camera work. And the interesting thing I find about it actually now, like I was thinking about it the other day, is Sam Raimi in general. My introduction to him would have been Spider-Man, and I wouldn't have known at that time that he made Evil Dead at the time of watching it when I watched Evil Dead. And now looking back on it, it's quite interesting. I think how I was so drawn to his work with Spider-Man, and then drawn to his work with Evil Dead.
Yeah.
And then as I got older, I started to realize how much of that Evil Dead like filmmaking techniques kind of found their way into Spider-Man. Like in Spider-Man 2 with Doc Ock in the hospital scene, and you've got like the arms moving around and whipping
around. Talk about that scene. Always talk about
like just how he managed to put like a horror scene in the middle of a Spider-Man film. How I only found out the other day that the car that Uncle Ben drives is the same car from Evil Dead. I only found out the other day.
It's the Oldsmobile.
Yeah, I only found that out recently. I'm like,
I don't think I knew that either.
Yeah, someone said that, and I was like, wait, what? And then Bruce Campbell, of course, who I didn't really make the connection there, because I would have seen Spider-Man first. So it's like, who's this guy that keeps popping up in Spider-Man? And then you watch Evil Dead, and you're like, oh, it's him.
Three completely different cameos.
Yeah.
Ted Raimi's in it as well, isn't he? I think he's in like.
I can't remember.
Yeah. I'm probably the same though. Like, I mean, I definitely had seen Evil Dead before Spider-Man, but I definitely wasn't of the frame of mind where I would have like known who directors were necessarily. So it's weird looking back at it and being a fan of like both sort of like genres, like real big fan of that Spider-Man trilogy. Even the third one to a degree, even though it gets even though it does get,
it's quite underrated, the third one. I think, especially when you look at it by today's standards and what comes out superhero wise now, I feel like it props the third one up a bit higher now, because some of the bad superhero films you get now are like way worse.
No, I agree with you there. And do you know what? I the Sandman story within that film kind of works. I feel like if the Sandman story was on its own in a film, or maybe two villains perhaps.
I think that's his biggest crime. It's just being bloated and like a bit messy. But then it's like a lot of superhero films nowadays are that now. So it's like it's kind of not like the biggest crime to commit.
Get 9 villains in there. But yeah, I guess I'm fairly similar to you in a way, where I saw Evil Dead 2 first, like on BBC Two, like late at night. I've said this on the podcast before, but I used to watch horror films with subtitles on and the volume on 0, just because my parents wouldn't have like allowed me to.
Did the same thing.
They'd just be like, turn the TV off, and it wouldn't have been because they didn't want me to watch the film. It would be because they'd be like, it's late, you got to go to school in the morning, or the electricity, turn it off.
So the secret, you're like cooped up in bed just trying to watch the TV, trying to see it.
So I watched things like Evil Dead, From Dusk Till Dawn, and like just loads of stuff like that. So I saw Evil Dead 2 first, and so in my memory that was always like the quintessential Evil Dead story. So that when I went back and watched The Evil Dead, bearing in mind, like the second one, it kind of remakes a certain section of that film anyway, doesn't it? It
Yeah.
always felt like, what's this? This isn't right. This just feels like Evil Dead 2, but not quite as good. I don't know. That was kind of like my point of view. So I kind of like grew up knowing what Evil Dead 2 was, and then I saw Army of Darkness quite late as well. It wasn't like I just moved on to that. It was probably like in my late teens that I saw Army of Darkness, and then of course like Evil Dead 2013, which is a completely different vibe, but I know you're a fan of that as well.
Yeah, that's like, I remember when that came out, so that's 10 years ago now. And for me, the excitement then was, I had just, well, I won't say just, but I was 18 at the time when that came out. And for me, I had so much excitement in just being, this is 18 rated. I can actually watch an Evil Dead film in the cinema, and like I'm
Yeah,
really excited. And I remember the trailers for that really got me. Like I was really like, this looks incredible. And then I remember watching it, and that's one of the most memorable cinema experiences I think I've ever had, because I just remember how relentless it is, how like violent and gory and visceral it is. And I
insane.
remember
Yeah.
two people walking out and never coming back. And I think I was on a date when I watched it the first time as well. And I remember
Oh,
this is just
no way.
a crazy date film to just bring someone in to watch Evil
I
Dead.
feel
But,
like you're gonna learn more about anybody than in any other experience than just seeing their reaction to some of those scenes.
yeah.
Like if they don't flinch, if they don't even flinch slightly, you're like, I'm
Yeah.
actually not
Red
interested,
flag.
or
Yeah.
maybe I'm even more interested than I would
Yeah.
have been. Just like, oh
You
yeah, I
passed the
just think
horror test.
you've passed the horror test. Yeah, I went on a date with someone to watch Hereditary, and this was like this was again like the perfect one, because I was like, this film is amazing, I absolutely love it, and she genuinely said that was awful, and honestly I was like, it made me rethink everything, and there wasn't a second date, and that
We are
could have
not
been,
compatible.
we're not compatible. That was awful, wasn't it? But it's actually said, that was awful, wasn't it? And I went,
I was like,
oh.
gonna have to explain why I love it.
The best bit was when that kid's head got taken off by a traffic pole. No, not compatible. But yeah, like the Evil Dead. I remember being a little bit apprehensive about Evil Dead 2013, because I was like, it doesn't look anything like the others, and like, but that's a good thing, isn't it? Like there are nods, there are subtle nods to the Sam Raimi films, ever so subtle, but it's clearly its own beast, and it's not afraid to. And that's one thing I would say, like, it is definitely way more brutal than Evil Dead Rise. Sure, there's some seriously brutal stuff in Evil Dead Rise, but I don't know if there were ever any moments where I genuinely just went, oh please don't do that. Like
Yeah, like
in Evil Dead 2013, there are at least 5 of those moments where I'm like, anything but that in
it's
this
just like
moment.
hardcore. Like, why I saw someone tweet the other day actually that Evil Dead Rise is like the Mad Max Fury Road of like horror, or of the Evil
Okay.
Dead
Yeah.
franchise. And I thought I would still say 2013 is that, because that's the one where it's like adrenaline filled. Like Rise is adrenaline filled as well, but it's like, I feel like for what Rise achieves in terms of like the violence and the visceral nature of it, I feel like 2013 is still like double the intensity, and it's just, once that film like gets going,
Yeah.
it just goes, doesn't stop, and it gets more and more violent, more and more makeup, more and more blood. Starts raining blood at the end, like it just goes crazy. But I love
Were,
it for it. Like,
were you tweeted like the probably the most hardcore GIF that's ever existed ever, which is
yeah,
like one of the final sequences in that. And I think one of the reasons 2013 Evil Dead works is because it is just like straight up cabin in the woods, and then as soon as the incantation is uttered, things just kick off. Whereas I think Evil Dead Rise, and I'm not saying this is to Evil Dead Rise's detriment in any way, I feel like it's telling, and despite the fact that Evil Dead 2013 is a story of addiction and family in a way, well, not in a way, but it is. This feels like there are more working cogs to this like story of family and motherhood as well. That I don't know. I feel like if it went as far as 2013 Evil Dead, I might be a bit like, okay, maybe we've lost some of the human story, slightly. I don't
yeah,
know.
I
I
agree with
mean,
that. Especially seeing, because I've watched Evil Dead Rise twice. The second time, I was able to really focus in on that storyline and really see, especially knowing where it would go, like to really analyze the kind of the first like half an hour and the building blocks of that. And it did actually work a lot better. I still think it worked good the first time I watched it, but I think there's a lot more nuance within it that I appreciated seeing it the second time,
Hmm.
and just the little subtleties to it that I thought just really set it up really nicely. So that once things do go a bit crazy, it's like you are invested in that family, and I think it's quite a unique take for especially a film of this nature, especially like a really like hardcore horror film like in the Evil Dead franchise, to focus on a family. Like, I think that's really actually quite unique, because usually it is like your disposable teens or people you don't
Yeah.
really care about or connect to. But with this one, it actually gave you like a good little basis of, well, this is a family.
Well,
This is actually like there's a reason why
this
they
was
really want to stick in this situation.
yeah, and this was the first time I think I'd ever seen an Evil Dead film, and I didn't think I want to see you as a Deadite. I kind of didn't want anyone to become a
Yeah.
Deadite. I wanted everyone to be all right. Like I just thought maybe just the mum will be a Deadite, and obviously this we are going to get into spoiler territory, but I'm so glad that there wasn't any of that in the trailer as well, showing anyone else.
Everything else, yeah, because yeah,
Yeah,
that was a surprise. Yeah.
yeah, okay. I understand that we've already been talking for quite a while, so I will let us just quickly rattle through some horror news. The first story of which is Evil Dead. Evil Dead related. So obviously it's been doing really well at the box office this weekend. The expectations I think were high, but I think it's gone beyond those. Apparently 23.5 million domestic in the US, and budget was like 19 million as well. So that's really good. Similar sort of to the 2013 Evil Dead opened to like 25 million, so similar sort of numbers to that. The reason I wanted to bring up this story is because Bruce Campbell earlier this week did say we're going to try and do Evil Dead movies. So Bruce Campbell's a executive producer, isn't he, alongside
Yeah,
Sam
on this
Raimi?
one,
That's
yeah.
right. We're going to try and do them every 2 or 3 years rather than every 10 years. And also Sam is working with his brother Ivan to create an overall Bible that will give future writers and directors an idea of where this thing should go next. So I guess like establishing the rules of the world and things that they want to continue to sort of focus on, for example.
I guess like a greater reference point as well, isn't it? I guess so that everyone could be on the same page, almost like a jumping off point. I guess so it's like this is like the basis of where all these films like connect or don't connect in the show, and then make your story off of this. Like, yeah,
Yeah, exactly. Which is good because at least they still got like control over sort of some elements of it, for example. So it's cool. And then we did mention this last week. We mentioned Insidious: The Red Door is going to have a trailer because I think when we recorded last week, the trailer hadn't arrived. But now we have a trailer, but I've not seen it. So
I actually
you
have.
seen it? You have. Okay.
Yeah.
So as far as I understand, there are returning characters from like earlier installments, like All Grown Up, for example, and it's going
Yeah, and
back to
I didn't actually recognize him when because it start. Well, I can't remember the ins and outs of the trailer completely, but it's following Patrick Wilson and Rose Byrne again, and the son. He's in college now, and the whole time I was watching the trailer, I was like, why didn't they get the original guy back? And it wasn't until after the trailer ended, I saw on Twitter like, oh, Ty Simpkins has returned. I was like, oh, it's actually him. He
it
kind
is
of looks
him.
quite
Yeah.
different, yeah. And I thought
Okay.
straight away, I was like, that's quite a cool thing. I like that because Insidious is one of those films that I have quite strong memories to, like the first one,
Hmm.
watching that in the cinema. Um, and that's always been a memorable film experience for me again. And I think the first two films are really good. And
Hmm.
I think they probably don't even get enough credit for how good they are and for how unique the kind of haunted house story of those is, but done in a different way. And then I think
Mm.
the third and the fourth kind of, because they were just separate stories, I didn't really connect with those films as well. I didn't think they were as good. But to see these characters come back in the new one, and to see the story kind of continue, it almost feels like a natural third film in the franchise because it's following the story of one and two and doing
Oh,
something
okay.
else.
Okay.
Um, and even the Red Demon from the first one's in the trailer. He's back as well.
Oh yeah,
And
Darth Maul
I'm
himself.
yeah, yeah. And I'm kind of curious just to see what they do with this story in the sense of if they're going to introduce anything new with the further and that kind of element. And the film's like, as you kind of expect with these type of films, it's teasing like dark secrets will be revealed, blah blah blah, about
Oh
the
right. Okay.
the further and things like that. I'm like, what is that? Is there any new creatures that we might see or anything like that?
Yeah.
So it looks better than I thought it would, to be fair. When I heard that they were making another one, I'm like, oh, they should have stopped because 3 and 4 wasn't that good. But this
Uh,
seems inspired. I don't even know who's directing it actually, but it seems like it's got a bit of passion and
yeah.
creativity behind
Okay.
it.
I've only ever seen the first one, so I don't know. It's just one of those. Sometimes like a certain franchise doesn't really like grab you, and I
Yeah,
think the first one I think I enjoyed it to a degree, but I didn't really have any inkling to like carry on seeing
yeah.
stories from it. So I didn't even actually know that this was number 5. I was a bit like, is this number 4, 5? But yeah, maybe I'll give the trailer a watch then. But I'll have to watch the others before. I can't watch 1 and then 5.
One and then drop it. So as I
That's
say,
not the way I roll.
for how this trailer's looking, 2's the only other one that needs to be seen, I guess. But I think I haven't seen 2 for a very long time. But if I remember correctly, I think the story on that one was actually quite interesting, just because it was not as conventional as of a sequel as you would think it would be. Like, I think they introduced some interesting ideas in that film, if I remember correctly, that were kind of like, oh, they actually, once again, it's kind of like there's a bit of creativity and passion here. There's not just making a sequel for sequel's sake. It's like they actually had an idea to expand upon the first film.
Okay, all right. Well, that's interesting at least. I definitely would like to check them out because it's just one of those things, I kind of think, I'll wait till they kind of wrap up making them and then I'll watch them. But then it seems like they're going on forever. So
yeah,
okay,
always
and
extending franchises.
Well, I know. So and the last bit of horror news I've got is that Hollywood Dreams and Nightmares, the Robert Englund story, is premiering on Screenbox in July. So a documentary all about his career. I mean, I'd love a horror documentary. I don't know. Are you the same, Terrelle?
Yes, yeah. Especially anything that goes kind of back into like legacy actors, I would say, of horror, or like iconic actors of horror. And I would kind of like, I don't know if it would ever happen, but I kind of feel like the time it's like a now or never moment right now to bring him back as Freddy one last time. If he was ever going to do it, I feel like this is the moment.
Yeah.
Or we're going to let the moment pass.
Because it's not a character you can really recast because we've already had that with a great actor as well, but it just was wrong, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It just wasn't right. But yeah, really interested to see this. I watched the Living with Chucky documentary on Screenbox like recently as well, which was really good. Like again, just kind of like talks about the whole franchise, like all of the big hitters involved, actors, filmmakers, and everything. So I find of all the behind the scenes stuff, I find horror movies the most interesting. I mean, just because I love horror movies, yeah, but I feel like they always have the most interesting behind the scenes stories because there's always stuff about like not much budget being involved, or like just some sort of like rogue filmmaker, or like again, I watch cursed films as well, or something crazy happened on set where you're just like, is this film cursed? I love it.
Yeah, it's like there's never like a straight line with horror films, especially like the older ones as well. There's always like a really good, like, it's almost like an inspirational story of, through all the odds we managed to bring the vision to life, and then that thing ended up becoming something iconic that's just stood the test of time.
Yeah, like a cult film or something. Yeah, it's definitely an inspiration. And I think it's probably one of the only genres that kind of has those stories. So okay, I mean that's all I've really got for horror news. I guess the next bit would be talking about what we've been watching. It doesn't have to be always horror related, but we touched kind of like in the last 7 days. Have you seen anything in particular that you've wanted to share?
Yeah, last night I actually watched Demons 2, which is an Italian, like,
Oh, nice. Yeah,
it's
yeah.
kind of zombie. I consider it a zombie film, even though it's technically demons. The first film I watched a few years ago, and I loved it. Like, the first one's set in like a cinema, and it's just demons get unleashed from this mask, and people are trying to escape the cinema. And I was supposed to watch the second one back then, but I just never got around to it. And then I heard someone this weekend mention how the sequel's set in an apartment. And I thought, ooh, that's like Evil Dead. So I was like, let me see what they did with this concept in an apartment. And I didn't think it was that great. I thought it took way too long to get going. Whereas the first one, I think, is just like a real fun, enjoyable film with great makeup and things like that. I felt like this one like meandered on the story for like half an hour, and it's only an hour and a half long, and nothing was really going on for the first half an hour. There's a lot of characters they're introducing you to, and you couldn't really figure out who the main one was supposed to be, and they weren't interesting characters either. And then by the time the carnage started happening, it was kind of a bit more entertaining, but you just didn't have anything to like kind of grasp you through it, and it wasn't fun enough to just stand on its own as like a fun experience. So that was.
I've definitely seen the first one. I thought I'd seen the second one, but now you say it's a high-rise building. Maybe I haven't.
Yeah, it's kind of.
I think I have.
There's one scene in it which is really. there's a scene involving a kid, which I do appreciate because it's rare, and it's the same with Evil Dead Rise. There's a scene where a kid turns into a demon, and they have this whole
Yeah.
sequence with him, which is pretty cool. But then what they do with him is clearly inspired, especially I think this film came out in the late 80s, clearly inspired by Alien and Gremlins, what they do with him later on in the film, which is kind of just interesting to watch. I'm like, okay, you could definitely see the creative influence in this scene here, and the makeup was all good throughout it, but just overall, it didn't really give that same fun factor that the first one had. Because I remember when I first watched it was a great surprise to me to watch the first one. I'm like, this is actually really good, and I don't see people talking about this film that often. But yeah, I wouldn't really recommend the second one as much.
Yeah.
And then I watched a lot of Evil Dead over the past couple of weeks, really. Watched all of them, and I think I've seen a couple of them. I don't know. There might even just in the past couple of weeks. I think I watched one of them twice within the past couple of weeks as well. Like I was really just getting into detail with Evil Dead.
You've been playing some of the Evil Dead game as well, right?
Yeah, which I don't usually get on with those multiplayer kind of horror games, because I always wonder like why with all these horror IPs that are making the games, why they all jump into multiplayer? Why don't they make a single player game? But this Evil Dead one actually is probably the best one I've played, because you get to play as the demons and you can play as like the hero characters, but the gameplay is so different when you're playing as the demon, and like when you're navigating like the game as the demon, it's literally that signature Sam Raimi perspective, and you're whizzing through like the forests, and you can like there's certain things you can do to like scare the other players, and like you've got this fear meter. So if you're playing as say Ash and you're out in the dark for too long, the fear meter will go up, and like if it goes up to like maximum and you're not paying attention to it, you'll get like this little jump scare thing that will pop up on the screen in front of you. And like it makes you more susceptible to the demons attacking. And there's actually like a little like mission structure that you got to do with your like co-op. It's actually pretty good. Like for a fan of Evil Dead, I'd say it's worth playing, because it actually does incorporate so much of the films into the game. And I know with the DLC they added like Mia from Evil Dead 2013, and a lot of people were requesting that for so long. And I kind of hope they've got something from Evil Dead Rise that they might add later on as well. That'd be pretty cool if they could like put Ellie in there or something like that.
I've got it downloaded, like ready to go, because I think it was like free on PlayStation Plus, like fairly recently.
Oh yeah, it was actually, a couple months ago,
Yeah, so I've got it downloaded, ready to go, and I'm kind of the same as you. Like, I would much prefer some sort of single player campaign, but I guess it's just because of the Dead by Daylight is so popular that all the games. Because is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre game also like a multiplayer?
Yeah, that's the next one that's coming. I think those guys who made that are the ones that made the Friday the 13th one, which I remember that for me was like the first of these like horror multiplayer games to come after Dead by Daylight. And I remember playing that, and I didn't play it for very long. I think I only played like a few matches of it, and I thought this is a bit because that was like a proper indie game. Like it was crowdfunded, I think, on Kickstarter. So it was very wonky, but the Evil Dead one is really, the Evil Dead one is really good. It feels like a really polished, like proper game, like not like just a thrown together kind of fan project.
I just get a bit bored. Like I can only play sort of 2 or 3 matches before I go, I'm kind of done with that. I don't feel like I want to continue with it. So, but I will check out the Evil Dead one. When it's a franchise you really love, it's good to do, even if the gameplay isn't great, it's good to just see those characters on screen, isn't it? And kind of be in that world for a while.
Yeah, and there are so many references to the films within those as well, so it makes it really kind of enjoyable, the Evil Dead.
I will I'll quickly run through a few things that I've seen. I'll stick to just horror because it's just been one of those weeks where I've been watching a lot. So I did go to the cinema to watch Renfield, which I've been looking forward to. The Nicolas Cage as Dracula, starring, I guess I want to say horror comedy, but I really don't know if I'd say much. I'd just say comedy. Like obviously it's got a horror character and some other things, but I feel like it's trying to be like 2 or 3 films at the same time, and none of them really worked for me. There's a really interesting sequence. I was just about to say this is a spoiler. I think it's been in trailers and promotional materials, but there's a sequence which kind of puts Nicolas Cage in like a 1930s Dracula movie as like a sort of not epilogue. What word am I thinking of? Epilogue's the end.
Prologue.
Prologue.
Yeah.
Yes. That's why I've got to have somebody else in this podcast. Otherwise, what are words? So yeah, that's interesting. But apart from that, Nicolas Cage wasn't on screen as much as I wanted him to be, and when he wasn't, I just found like I had little to no interest in what was happening. It's kind of like a horror, a comedy, a buddy comedy, and like a police procedural, and Dracula just happens to be involved as well. It never really like focuses on one thing enough. So yeah, I was a little bit disappointed. I was kind of looking forward to that.
So has he like got the lesser of the screen, a lot less screen time than you probably would have expected?
Yeah, I mean Nicholas Hoult is like clearly the lead, but he's not. Yeah, Nicholas. I mean, when Nicholas Cage is on screen, he's great. He's having a lot of fun as Dracula. And he's just chewing the scenery, and some of the visual effects are okay. A lot of CGI blood though. You know, when CGI blood kind of just, I don't know, it just makes everything seem a bit, I don't know,
Cheap a bit. It's just
bit
yeah,
cheap.
I know what you mean. Especially when
Yeah,
you've got films like Evil Dead coming out where it's like throwing like physical,
yeah,
palpable looking blood at you, and yeah,
yeah. I
very
mean,
easy to notice nowadays.
how many gallons? I know you said fairly recently. How many gallons?
For this, it's kind of crazy because there's a lot of blood in Evil Dead Rise, but he said it's 1,700, the director. But then the remake had 50,000 in the climax
Yeah,
alone, which is crazy.
yeah. I know it is insane. I mean, there's a particular scene where you could think about where all the blood came
Yeah.
and went in in the Evil Dead Rise. So I also watched a movie called Ennis Men, directed by Mark Jenkin. I don't know if you've seen anything of this, Terrell. It's like a very experimental. It reminded me of A Field in England, the Ben Wheatley film, which is it's
I've never
very
seen that either,
experimental.
actually.
No, it's kind of
No.
like it's very minimalist. It's very lo-fi. It's very experimental. It's very it's like a trip, really. It's like a bad trip, but this is a set in like on a Cornish coast. So it feels there's something really familiar about it because it feels very, very British. But it's like it's set in the 70s and it's like 70s real 70s folk horror vibes. A good way of explaining it is um it feels like a proof of concept for the movie Men in a way.
Hmm.
Not necessarily the content of it, because I wouldn't say the story is very similar at all, but just this kind of like isolation in sort of like a picturesque, what feels like countryside environment. It was just a really strange film. You know, sometimes it's difficult to. It feels like a much more of like an atmospheric experience rather than something that's got much in the way of a plot. But also, he's got another movie called Bait, which is set in like a Cornish town. It's about a fisherman, and that's more of like a drama. But oh yeah, so the key thing is it's all shot on, I think, a 16mm film, where it's just all like the aspect ratio. It's like, well, a 1:1 aspect ratio. It's got loads of film grain on it. Sometimes the sound feels like it's dubbed over, like the dialogue and stuff. So it almost feels like somebody on Letterboxd described it like it feels like a 70s public information film, but like it's a horror movie slash obviously Bait was like a drama film. So it's
Sounds
very
very
like unique.
intriguing, like different.
It's
Yeah, like I like films like that where it's like a very abstract, just very different. Like you've got
yeah,
very
yeah,
the director had very like specific intentions with how
yeah.
to shoot it, what it was going to look like,
Mm.
and
And
yeah,
Ennis Men is kind of the same. So it feels like a real stylistic like anomaly in a way. But it was interesting. If anything, if I for in terms of the story and that, maybe it didn't grip me as much as like the cinematography and like the way it looked and sounded as well. It's just like fascinating, like a really, really strange watch. And then the last thing I'll mention is a movie from 2012 called Would You Rather, um, directed by David Guy Levy. I don't know if he's directed much more actually. This is one of those films that I'd heard of and never ever bothered with. Have you ever seen this before?
I've never seen it, but I feel like it's
You've
one of
never
the
seen?
ones I've seen on Netflix or something pop up
Yeah.
constantly, and I'm like,
So,
I'll watch that one day, and then I've just
yeah.
never got around to it.
So the thing that drew me to this is it stars Jeffrey Combs from Reanimator and From Beyond and stuff like that. So
Okay.
it I don't know how to frame it without it's just it almost feels like it's one of those films where like let's play a game, but it's not Saul. However, it's loads of like rich people deciding to play a game with people who are a little bit down and out. And but it's got loads of like people you recognize in it. So it's got Brittany Snow, who was in X.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It's got let's try to remember what else it's got. It's loads of faces. Oh yeah, John Hurt from Home Alone, the dad from Home Alone, the original.
This is quite like a random assortment of actors, like
It's a load of
recognizable faces.
yeah, yeah, definitely. So but it's just one of those it's one of those films where I'm like, if it really just like dug its heels in and went for it, it could be a really good film. But it's kind of like, it's essentially how it sounds. Loads of people gather around a table and a guy essentially with a gun to their head says, would you rather do A or B? And it's like making those terrible choices in order to, like, I guess it's a bit like,
I'm thinking Truth or Dare is what I'm thinking of.
That's the one. See, I've never seen that, so I feel like that's what it's similar to, but because I've never seen it, I've not. Yeah, it wasn't hugely effective. I felt like it could have gone a step further, but it didn't. But Jeffrey Combs, is great to see him in like a, I guess, a semi-modern film. 2012, still over 10 years old, but yeah. But I mean, that's pretty much it for me in terms of what I've been watching this week, especially like horror and horror adjacent stuff. Apart from the film of the week, it always feels like we start talking about the film so far into the episode. Now I've been putting time codes in the episodes because we have had several complaints about that. So just look at the time codes and you can see where we start talking about the film. However, we have been talking about Evil Dead pretty much non-stop since the start of the episode as well. So Evil Dead Rise is a 2023 American supernatural horror film written and directed by Lee Cronin. It's the 5th installment of the Evil Dead film series. The film stars Lily Sullivan and Alyssa Sutherland as two estranged sisters trying to survive and save their family from deadites. So in terms of ratings so far, we've got 7.4 on IMDb. On Rotten Tomatoes, it's got 84% critic score, 80% audience score, and 3.6 on Letterboxd. I've got some choice reviews to share with you here. Patrick Williams says, features 3 different colors of puke. Thumbs up. 3 stars. Diana says, it's very likely that I will never use an elevator or a cheese grater again. 4 stars. Seth's review says, unapologetically silly, disgusting, obscenely violent. If you're looking for an onslaught of sadistic carnage, you're in the right place. 3.5 stars. And finally, Amanda X says, Evil Dead Rise is a fantastic addition to the beloved franchise. Lee Cronin perfectly captures everything we love about the series and adds his own touches that expand on what is known as the Evil Dead universe. 4.5 stars. So a nice cross-section there of what everybody seems to think about it. But the fact that like critic scores are super high, fans of the franchise seem to be really happy as well. Like, I mean, how many times does a new installment of a franchise come out and it is just such a disappointment?
Well,
it never happens, is it? Like, everyone happy.
Yeah, that's
that
the thing.
Happens.
It's rare.
Like when you think about like Scream, that seems to be like one way or another. People are either loving it or just like, well, it's not. The people aren't sort of giving it the praise that they're giving things like Evil Dead Rise. And yeah, when you said just now about demons being like a zombie film, like I think in a way a lot of people do assume that Evil Dead Rise and Evil Dead is like a zombie film. Oh, it's another zombie film or another possession film like something from the Conjuring universe. People have no idea that it's so different to that.
I feel like people are only just starting to realize. I find it really interesting, the reception of this film, because it's like, for the type of film that it is, usually this isn't the type of film to get the max reviews, positive reviews and reactions, and to even like tap into like general audiences in a way, like, and to draw their interest. And I find it interesting that now, because like, even with the 2013 one, it didn't really do that. So like I find it interesting that now horror's got to that place where outsiders are like, I think horror's always been a successful genre, but I think it's become so like consistent with the success. Because if I think back to like even when the remake came out 10 years ago, there wasn't really that many memorable horror films around it that I can remember that came out that were like good. Maybe The Conjuring, because that came out in the same year. But aside from that, whereas now with horror, like there's like a consistent string of like at least good to great horror films that are kind of coming out, and you kind of get like almost like a little streak of releases that come out, which I think maybe builds up the general audiences to like, when they see one and they see another and they kind of like them, like, oh, actually these films are pretty good, and then they kind of like more interested to see the next thing, whatever it is, and maybe it's something they wouldn't have watched before, but they're more intrigued about it. And maybe like Evil Dead's been caught up in that now, and now general audiences are seeing it a bit more.
Definitely, it is crazy to think that we haven't had an Evil Dead film for like 10 years. That is insane.
Yeah,
like when Evil Dead celebrated its 10th anniversary recently, I was like, surely not.
Yeah,
Surely not. Like that
it's kind of
just
crazy to think.
doesn't feel right. So yeah, I do like the thought of Bruce Campbell sort of saying we're gonna have them every couple of years. But yeah, when you say about general film goers and that, my mum even texts me about Evil Dead Rise. So she hasn't seen it, and she is a horror fan. She does like horror films, but not maybe not as much as me. But yeah, she even texted me saying, "Are you going to see Evil Dead Rise this weekend?" And I said, "Yes." And she just wrote, "My worst nightmare." So, but I
So
said, you need to go and watch Evil Dead 2013 because if you can make it through that, this will be. I don't want to say an easy ride, but if you can
an
make it through that
easier one, yeah.
maybe slightly easier, yeah. Now you did mention the. Oh, well, I'll talk about the cast a second. Sorry. So Lily Sullivan plays Beth, who is our lead hero character, I guess you would say, and she's the protagonist. Alyssa Sutherland plays Ellie in what has got to be a career-defining role for her. And then we've got some younger actors. Morgan Davies plays Danny. Gabrielle Echols plays Bridget. Nell Fisher plays Cassie. And there is it's quite a small cast, isn't it? There's a bit more of a sort of supporting
Few
cast who
extras,
play
yeah.
some neighbors. I was glad to see neighbors because this was the thing. Again, from the trailer, I was like, there's got to be other people in this building. We've got to see. We've got to see, and there's got to be fodder as well, isn't there? There's got to be
Yes.
deadite fodder. I was going to ask you this question because this was something that what did you think when you first heard that Evil Dead Rise was going to be like? So the concept was Evil Dead so on your podcast, Mind of the Escapist, you mentioned it's the first like urban setting for the franchise as well. The fact that everything else happens in a cabin in the woods, and this is suddenly becoming, in an urban setting in a high-rise building where there's loads of people. Like, I just wondered what your opinion, what you kind of thought the film was going to be initially, because in my head I was like, okay, so Dread but with Deadites. That's initially what I thought.
That's an interesting thing, actually. Yeah, I didn't think of it
That's
that
initially
way.
what I thought. I thought it was just going to be, and then when I saw the trailer, I was like, okay, so it looks like it's a bit more small scale and sort of, yeah, like that. Did you have any idea of what this kind of
I'm
film was
not
going
too
to be?
sure. I can't remember. Like, because it's interesting because I did watch Demons 2 yesterday. That's more like the Dread kind of angle of it, where I do think one
Okay.
thing that Demons film does is it really kind of like you're seeing multiple people across this whole apartment block, all types of different people that are all caught in the situation, and carnage is happening on multiple floors, and you feel like you're experiencing it throughout the whole apartment block. Whereas in this one, it is kind of that contained story, and I think I was more just shocked that, oh, there's a new Evil Dead film coming out when I first heard about it, and then I thought, oh, that's just interesting that they're pulling it away into a different setting. But I don't know if I really knew what to expect from it. And I remember they announced it. I don't know if they announced it for HBO Max because they did have plans
Yeah,
to put it
that's a
on there
good point, isn't it?
initially.
Yeah.
So I think when I heard that, I kind of like pulled my expectations down a bit because I was like, oh, this it's like because it's almost like a straight to streaming
Yeah,
film. It's
yeah,
like,
no, I know
what?
what you
Like, is
mean.
this gonna have the real essence of
Yeah.
Evil Dead, or is it something that they're just throwing out to put on the platform?
I liked the like dual meaning of what like Rise could be, because obviously Rise usually gets tacked on to like a film title when it's like the beginning, or like a prequel to something. It's the Rise, like Rise of the Planet of the Apes, for
Yeah,
example. But also like I had this dual meaning where I was like, okay, so maybe it's a prologue, maybe it's like the origins of the Necronomicon. But also it's in a high-rise building, something like
yeah.
that. I don't know. That was kind of like the initial thoughts that I had. But yeah, when you say about it being contained, I think one of the things that worked the most for me in this film was the fact that it isolates this family. And on the surface, you're like, well, that's kind of impossible, isn't it? Like, if they're in a high-rise building, how on earth are they going to be isolated? Isolated in the same way that the cabin would be isolated when roads get ripped away and there's like a flood that literally you can't drive, can't drive
Yeah.
away. But it isolates you, and I love that. And there's something so effective about that, because it's scary, because it's almost like, okay, I should be safe in my home, and I should be safe in a built-up urban environment with loads of people, and this is where I should be safe from supernatural things, right? But it's the place I'm not safe at all, and I thought they just did a really good job of isolating them.
Something I really appreciated in the first time I appreciated it, but then I really was paying attention to it the second time, is in very small amount of screen time, I like how they depict LA in this film, because it's really like it desolate and dark and kind of grimy. It doesn't feel like LA at all when you see like the exterior shots of the streets, like the very brief shots. Say when you first get introduced to, I forgot her name, not Ellie, the sister, the other sister, the main like lead,
Beth.
Beth, yeah, and she leaves the building. Well, when she comes out of the toilet, and she leaves the building and she's walking across the street, and it's just very dark and very moody. And then even when you get to the apartment block, it almost, from the inside and the outside, it almost looks abandoned. It looks like an abandoned building almost, like the way that is shot and the lighting of it all. It just looks very desolate and dark and dim, and it makes it feel like a character. And it also, there's a shot that I really like, because it's like an off-axis shot looking up at the apartment block, and it looks like the Tower of Terror or something, like a ride. It just looks like some freak kind of building that has this.
I always tilt my head at that shot. That shot, when it was in the trailer, I always tilt my head and find myself like looking at it like that. But yeah, I agree. I agree with you there when you say it feels like abandoned, because I was getting like Escape from New York vibes. Where I was like,
definitely. It's got that type of dystopian kind of feel to it. And like I remember, there's that scene where she's yelling out the window at someone, like someone with the trolley, like at the bottom, like trying to get help, and it's pouring with rain, and it's like, that's like the only person you see in LA in the whole film outside, I think. Like
that,
and it's like
that reminds me of. Did you play Silent Hill 4: The Room?
No, I never played that one.
Oh, man. So the reason it reminded me of this. Sorry, I'm gonna be. I'm almost like gushing, because it reminded me of so much like games and films that I just love. It reminded me of Aliens. It reminded me of, and I'll explain why when I get to it. It reminded me of Silent Hill 4: The Room, which is one of my favorite Silent Hill games. So you basically get trapped in the character you play as in Silent Hill 4: The Room. You get trapped in an apartment, and it's almost like you get trapped in a supernatural way, because you're just like shouting from the window, how can nobody hear me? You know, people are walking past the door and you're banging on the door and you're looking for the peephole, but no one can see you. You physically can't get out. Like it's almost like you're about, and I almost got that feeling, because it's like it doesn't necessarily say that, but I almost felt that they were trapped there via supernatural means, in terms of the lift and the phone lines and everything else like that. Sure, but the fact that there's literally someone on the ground and they're shouting, and the rain is so heavy that it's like
so heavy. It's like demonic rain almost. Like it's somehow like the supernatural spirits kind of taking over that. It feels like, where it's like it's contributing to all the elements of like keeping them stuck in this situation and like having to face the terror.
And that's scary, you know. And again, you have fun with these films, but I like it when certain little details like that do make you feel like genuinely like, oh god, that'd be horrible to be in that
horrible situation to be in. And going back to what you said about the title, I think I caught onto like the high rise element of Evil Dead Rise, and like the most obvious part of the title I don't think really registered with me until the title card. And then when you see the title card and Evil Dead is literally rising out of the water, I was just like, wow, like that really like set it for me. And that title card for me, I've been thinking about it for days, and like for me, the title card on that, I'm trying to think, like, that's got to be one of the best. It sounds like hyperbole to say it, but it's got to be one of the best title cards I think I've ever seen. Because and I've always appreciated title cards, and I feel like it's like a kind of like a lost art in filmmaking, where you can really use a title card to convey a very specific feeling or emotion about the experience you're about to provide in the film. As a filmmaker, like I feel like if I was a director, I would be very hyper focused on that title card and when I'm going to introduce the title and how and what the purpose of how I'm doing that and what you're supposed to feel when you're seeing it. And I feel like this film is such a great example of that, like dialed up to 11, where you've just had this crazy opening sequence, and then it's like you can't ignore the title of this film at all when you're watching that screen. The music swells up.
What's this film called?
And it's like the way that shot, like I think again, like it's one of those things where, like, as a fan of Evil Dead, if I was to be put in the director's chair, I'd find it very daunting, because I'm like, how would I put my spin on this franchise? And it's like, as great as that title card is, I would have never thought of doing something like that. But it's incredible, like, and just the way even the title reflects in the water is just really cool. Like, you see the reflection of the title in the water as she rises up.
I honestly didn't even notice that.
Yeah, and it's just, and the way the whole screen, like, because the title's so big, it like the whole palette almost turns red, and like there's like almost like a reflection of red on the whole frame just from that title alone. So it's like as the body rises up, it goes from this background to like red going over the whole water and the sky, and that just it blew me away. And in the premiere crowd, people were just like cheering, and you felt everyone kind of think, "Whoa!" Like when that title came up, and I thought that was just a perfect way to do it.
Because I think big text in title cards is definitely something that's in at the moment. But I think, my favorite type of title card, and I agree, this is probably the most effective one I can think of in recent memory. But when it sort of arrives, the first thing I like is when a title card arrives, like, I don't know, 20 minutes in. That's one of my favorite things.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. What's that? Is that called something? I don't even know.
I don't even know, to be fair. But there's a film I watched recently, actually. I watched, I'm going to pronounce it wrong now. I think it's Suzume. It's the new anime film that's just come out.
Oh, okay.
From the director who made Your Name. And they did a similar thing where they have this like really engrossing opening sequence, and the film's just going on. There's a lot going on. And I want to say it was probably at least 15 minutes into the film. And then the title card came. I was like, whoa. It kind of made me think, oh yeah, that was just the beginning. Like, and now we're getting started. And it's really effective, like placing it like later than you expect, because some films don't have one. So like you just kind of, you're not always looking for it, but then when it kind of comes out of nowhere, it suddenly does kind of.
Sometimes it's right at the start of the end credits, isn't it? Like, I think John Wick Chapter 4 had that, didn't it? Where it was like right at the end of the film, like started as credits. But yeah, the delayed credit. I think my favorite example is The Departed, because I don't think it comes up until Leonardo DiCaprio's like in prison. Yeah, so I think there's like loads that happens before this, and then suddenly that Dropkick Murphys song "Shipping Out to Boston" plays, and then The Depart. It's just so impactful because you just go, "Oh, we're starting now, are we?"
Yeah, it's like all what you just seen here is just the setup. It's like, oh, this is just
it's good. It's good. But yeah, I agree with you when I'm like, because sometimes I see title cards in films and I go, "Oh, is that the title card?" The font on the font on the poster is so much better than like the actual title card.
Title card in the film.
So many times I'm disappointed by them, but this was one where I just went, that's good, isn't it? That's good.
And it's something special when everyone online is talking about this title. I don't think I've ever even seen that happen, really. Like everyone online unanimously like, this title card is incredible. Like, and you almost sometimes think as a film fan, it's like, do people really pay attention to these things as much as I do? Like, and then when a title card like that comes on, it's like, yes, they definitely do, because everyone's talking about it.
Because sometimes like horror movie title cards are kind of like, they'll happen in the quiet moments. Like, here's the film, this is the title of it, and now's the opening scene that is like gonna be so effective, and the title card is almost like forgotten. But yeah, when you say it's forgotten art, I definitely agree with that. How did you feel? So one of the things I definitely wanted to ask you about was there is a spin on that classic Sam Raimi Evil Dead POV scene. Now, I don't know how you feel about this, but I was like, that's really quite ingenious, like what they did with it.
Yeah, I thought the same. And I got a big laugh at the premiere as well, like, because it's such a great way to start the film, and you're like, oh, we're straight in it. Something's going on right now. And it's like, nope, it's a modern film, and like the little drone.
Yeah.
I thought that was really smart.
That almost
reminded me
of
expectations.
Yeah, definitely. And it reminded me of like something that, I don't know, like Jordan Peele would do. Like, he seems to go, right, here's what your expectation of this horror trope is, and now I'm going to present it in a completely different way, and just it's really effective. So yeah, I guess if you haven't seen the film, I recommend going to see the film. But if you are listening to this, and there are spoilers, we are going to spoil the whole film. But the POV is just a drone, which again, like, I just think is great, just because it just really, it is great for the setting, but also for the characters that it establishes initially. So these aren't characters that we're going to be spending the entirety of the film with. So this is Teresa, Caleb, and Jessica. They're vacationing at like a lakeside cabin, and this was from the trailer where I was like, how is this lake stuff gonna link back to the stuff in the high-rise building? But it's just done really well, isn't it? Because all throughout I was like, how is this going to link back to that? How is this going to link back to that? So essentially it's Teresa and Caleb are kind of like, I think Jessica's sick and she's in the cabin. Again, a cabin which is like a perfect triangle shape, which is so in right now. We're talking about things being in right now. Triangle shapes, Midsummer. Oh god,
Hansel and Gretel, I think, is one.
Hansel and Gretel's got like a triangular house.
There's
Is it
another
that
one. Not the
classic
witch,
horror
no.
story?
Oh yeah, 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 that one. Yeah.
That's got like a sort of triangle house. Things
What
like
I
the
really like
void.
about that shot though is it's warped, and I don't know, like I don't know if how much of that was like in the
Yeah.
camera view or how much of that is like post effects, where it's like when you look at the house, that's in the center of the frame, and everything on the outside, like the cars, they're kind of like bent up a bit. So it's
Okay.
like there's like a circular. I don't even know what you would call it, but it's like there's a circular like lens that's focusing on the house in the middle.
Something
But
like a
then
fisheye sort of going on
yeah,
or
that's kind
something.
of like what it is. And then the outer edge is a bit out of focus, but it's also warped where everything looks like it's bending outward a bit.
It's just
And it just
something
creates
like,
this sense of unease. Like straight away, you're
yeah.
looking at it, and you're like, this isn't how it should look. So it's like straight away, you're like, something's up, like something's
Even in
wrong.
like even in the middle of a day, in like a
Yeah,
lovely summer's day, like I'm not going in there.
yeah,
Um, I just kept thinking, how much is that place on Airbnb? Because it looks because it looks amazing. Um, so yeah, so the guy who's like the boyfriend of Jessica, I think it's Jessica, isn't it? Yeah, yeah, that's right. So Jessica is the one floating on above the water. So Teresa and Caleb are like kind of just passing time while Jessica's ill in the cabin. Teresa just wants to read her book. She's reading. Oh, this is enough. This is. Just now I'm thinking about it. This Wuthering Heights, isn't it? This
yeah,
whole link to Wuthering Heights and what it does in this was also great. Uh, so Caleb's flying a drone around, and Teresa just goes, "I'm going to go and check on Jessica," and she's like asleep in the cabin, and she sits down. Jessica is like mumbling in her sleep, it sounds like, but I don't think it's anything too scary because she's like, well, just let her rest. She's not well. We're just made to think that she's ill at this moment. But yeah, she starts talking, but then she starts reading out the exact passage that Teresa is reading from the book, which I thought was great because that's just super super effective, isn't it? And we don't
yeah,
actually see Jessica; we only see her from behind.
yeah. I thought it was. It's weird because I don't even feel like I caught. I don't feel so wrapped up in the moment the first time I watched the film. I didn't even think I caught that that's what was really going on until the second time I watched
Yeah.
the film. I was like, oh, she's literally reading because they have that quick shot of where you see the page and the words on the page,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's like, oh, she's reading it directly off, and obviously you got the kind of voice in your. I always find it interesting looking at it from the perspective of because the second time I watched the film, I watched it with a friend who's not as familiar with Evil Dead. Like I just introduced her to the 2013 one like the week before,
Mm.
and I find it interesting to look at the certain elements of the film through the eyes of someone who's less familiar with the franchise. And it's like, what would they think in this scene? Do they think she's just sick? Do they think, she's when
Yeah.
she's reading out the pages of the book? What are they thinking at this particular point? As someone that's not familiar, like fans like us, we know, yeah, she's she's gone. Like,
Oh,
but
that's a shame.
I find it interesting, and I think the suspense that was built up in that little scene, and the voice work and the sound design was really good for her, like reading out the dialogue and just how
Yeah.
impactful that felt.
Yeah, definitely. It was definitely effective. And but yeah, you're right. So I think in most scenarios like that, you kind of think, okay, we've seen stuff like this in like haunting movies, haven't we? Where somebody's committing an act or doing something which is totally impossible, essentially. Like you talk about things like The Exorcist, like that's where some stuff like this kind of. I mean, I'm sure it didn't originate with that, but that's where a lot of it was made popular. Where they're just certain things are happening where you're just like, oh god, better get a
Yeah.
priest involved. but yeah, so she falls off the bed, and this was a scene from the trailer as well. And this was pretty effective. So I guess we're supposed to believe something's happened along the way where she's ended up getting possessed and she's become a deadite. But how does this sort of plan out? Because I know she grabs her by the hair, Teresa, but just Teresa. Oh, Teresa just leans in to see if she's okay, and then
Yeah, I can't remember if she says something to her. I can't remember
oh
what
yeah,
it was she says to her.
I remember now. I remember now. So she calls Caleb like a meat puppet. She calls him like a brainless meat puppet because obviously she's not getting on well with him because they don't know each other. They're just forced into the scenario. And then Jessica says, "Who's the meat puppet now?" Something like that. Something along
Yeah.
those lines. And then a classic scalping, which is always effective in any film, isn't it?
It's just so what I found because I saw that clip in one of the trailers, and I remember, in
Yeah.
fact, one of the trailers they did a trailer for April Fools. I don't know if you saw it, where it was set at the cabin. It was made to look all nice, like almost like an advert for an Airbnb type of thing, and then it
Okay.
hard cuts to like that moment with that. And I was in the gym watching that clip. I remember, and like my jaw actually dropped because it was like what it just came out of nowhere. But that moment happened in the film so quick that I didn't even have enough time to register, oh, this is that moment that I saw from the trailer. So it's one of those things where, like, going back to when we were talking about the trailers, like, I'm glad it worked out that way because I didn't even see it coming, even though I'd actually seen it before. I still didn't see it coming in that exact moment because it's so quick how she kind of leans in and then you just see her wrap her hands around her hair and then just yank it and just that
moments
shot
like that, I'm just like, how hard must she have pulled that
to like, just rip off, and then the next shot you just see the hair just drop down on the little pier.
Oh yeah,
and she walks out.
So
and then,
so Teresa goes out to like Caleb, who's still like playing about with his drone, and she's obviously just like in pain and sort of terrified, collapses. But then Jessica sort of like follows after her. And this is another thing I love, you know, like when someone is clearly a deadite, people's reaction, which is just like, oh my god, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Which I guess, of course, you would say that, but Jesus. And that's when Jessica grabs the drone, and I was like, what the hell is she gonna do with that? But deadites seem to be into self-mutilation as well, and she just what does she do? She kind of just like
she grabs it, I think, and almost like ricochets into the water. It's almost like it's kind of weird. It's like she just bounces off of it almost. Like she kind of clips it and it just throws her into the water. Like,
yeah. And then Caleb like immediately jumps in after her, and this is good because like this is like I don't know, a Jules moment.
Yeah.
Scene from Jules, yeah. Or like if we're in a lake, what could we say? Lake Placid.
Yeah.
But like a deadite in the water, like sort of dragging him down, and then there's sort of like blood and stuff, and we're kind of like seeing it from Teresa's point of view as well. And that is when we get the moment of rising. And there's something like Jesus Christ like about the
it is like,
and
I think
and the rise, and of course
it's shot so well as well. I think like that shot itself, like it just looks so beautiful, just the actual scenery around it. And then when you just get her head poke out, and then it's just like it makes me think. It's one of those things where when I see it, I'm like, how has that not been done before? Like in like even in Evil Dead, like you haven't had a moment like that I can remember where you literally see them like kind of rise up Christ-like that. And I can't even really think of that many demonic films in general that have shot it like that, because it's almost like a baptism. Because just coming out of the water and then like you said, just with the music and the sound design of that, and then the title coming up behind it, and then I was like, oh yeah, Evil Dead Rise. it's like of course.
Yeah, that's what she's doing. But yeah, there's something great about that, because in like a lot of films about possession and that, the demons and are sort of always mocking Christianity in a way. Again, back to The Exorcist, where Pazuzu's constantly mocking, you know, men of the cloth and Christianity is and even something as simple as that. The Deadites, they love to talk trash, but you know, nothing. They don't even need to say a word when they're rising up out of the water like that.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that we get the card, and that's it. I wouldn't have liked to have seen anything else, I think, in that moment.
It cuts off at the perfect time, that scene, just to be like,
yeah,
and that's such an impactful title card.
Yeah, and I mentioned before, like the sound design, the soundtrack as well. In those moments, the fact that it kind of happens and there's this big swell of like the music as well, which is just so effective. Okay, and then it cuts off, and then this is interesting because it says 1 day earlier, so you know for a fact that this is going to somehow link to this scenario, but then it feels so far removed from this, where you're just like I was just fascinated through the whole film, just thinking, how are they going to link it to this opening scene? So we're introduced to guitar technician Beth, definitely guitar technician, and remember that. That's very key.
Not the groupie.
not the groupie, but that's true though, isn't it? Like this is a completely different story. This is a completely different take on it, but how many people who work in like the arts, music, you know, anything, it could be film criticism or something like that, family members definitely don't take certain professions seriously.
Yeah, it's like, no, this is an actual thing we get hired to do. Like, people need to be there to do this.
And maybe it's like a generational thing, but the amount of times like, oh yeah, I'm doing this, and it's just like, you're doing what? What, are you going on tour with bands and just like, what are you doing to their guitars? Yeah, you must be a groupie. But it doesn't feel like her sister's from like a completely different generation. It feels like they're kind of close in
Yeah, like
age,
she
don't they?
should
Like,
have an understanding of like,
but
this is an
not only
actual
that,
thing.
she's told the neighbor that
Yeah.
she's a groupie. So,
Oh dear.
I mean, I don't. I might just be talking about myself, but I've definitely been in those scenarios before where, like, I don't know, a family member or maybe a friend of the family will just seem to know something about my life. I'm like, Mum, why have you
Yeah,
told
where'd you get
that
that
person?
information from? Yeah.
Where have you got that information from? Again, it feels real. It feels really realistic for like a family, but also like an estranged family, essentially. Like Beth is clearly on good terms with her sister, but she doesn't seem like she's ever present in her life. And obviously, we get confirmation of that when more things unfold. Um, but yeah, so she does. Well, she does a pregnancy test, doesn't she? And again, don't need to know what the result is because we can see it in her eyes.
Yeah.
We know exactly what's going on there. So does she like immediately leave and go straight to?
Yeah, because I think someone's calling her back out. So she's in the
Yeah,
toilet. Someone's calling for her back out, and she says, "Oh, I need to wait." But then I think it then just cuts to her leaving.
she leaves. Yeah. So yeah, exactly. She needs to be with her family. I guess this is one of those things where she obviously feels scared and unsure about this, and it feels like she's going to have to make a big decision. So she needs her sister there to help with that. And yeah, then we're introduced to the family in the high-rise building. We get that shot you obviously mentioned before. Is that now that shot with the rain? It's just
I think so.
going down.
Yeah, yeah. I think that is like the establishing shot of the building. Yeah.
Yeah. And like a very modern, like progressive family, right? So we've got uh a mum who it turns out to be a single mum, but at this moment Beth doesn't realize that. Mum who's like a seamstress slash tattooist.
Oh yeah, tattoo. Yeah, yeah, yes, yeah.
Yeah. That's right. And then we've got Bridget, who's like she likes going to protests and that. She seems like very up to speed on social injustice and everything like that. Cassie, who seems like a very the youngest daughter, who seems like a very how could you describe her? I guess artistic in a way. She's creating sort of like her own. She reminds me of Sid from Toy Story, creating loads of
Yeah.
like a
Combining
doll on the
toys. Yeah. Staffany.
combining toys. Stephanie, oh, that was
Yeah.
great. And then Danny, who's like a like
DJ, yeah, or
DJ slash
I believe so, like a DJ and like very
some sort of
into the
musician.
music.
Yeah, yeah. I've got a pretty good setup going on, right? For I feel like the neighbors would be absolutely raging.
Yeah.
So yeah, Beth arrives and is sort of like reunited with everybody, and we get some nice establishing family moments to kind of the dynamic between the family members. But also we find out that the dad, I don't know if he's named actually. I think he is named.
Don't think he is, yeah.
Yeah. So Alyssa Sutherland, so Ellie's husband slash partner, actually, I don't know if they're married, has left. And Beth's like, why didn't you call me? Why didn't you try and get in touch? I would have tried to help you through this. And she's like, I did actually more than once. And then Beth goes and listens back to her voicemail. I mean, I'm definitely guilty of this.
Yeah. Rarely
What's
answer
that?
my phone.
What's that? You left me a voicemail. I'm supposed to listen to that? See how many seconds it is. 30 seconds.
Even though now it's easier than ever to listen to them as well. It's just like never look. That's the thing. If I was to look at my phone now, I probably got some on there now that I just didn't even ever notice. But
yeah, there you go. You better do it just in case.
but what I like about that scene, yeah, what I like about that scene is it establishes quite, and this is things I kind of really picked up on the second time more focusing on it, is it kind of establishes very easily that Ellie can't depend on her because she's off touring, doing whatever, and not really paying attention. But then multiple times, Beth makes it clear that she needs Ellie for that kind of reassurance and support because she always knows the right way to do things. I think she says something along the lines of that, like you always know the right way to do things or the right solution for my problems. Which is why she's there in the first place, I believe, is because she found out she's pregnant, she doesn't know what to do, come to her sister for that kind of guidance. But then straight away you're kind of shown that it's a one-sided kind of balance in that regard in this relationship with the sisters.
It's really realistic though, isn't it? Because you find that a lot, don't you, with like friendships or sometimes with like family members and stuff. Sometimes that reliance is really like a one-way street, like
one-sided thing, and it's like depicted in a way that's not too over the top as well, which is what I like. It's very nuanced because it's like they don't hate each other, And like very quickly after their little bicker, they do like kind of make up and joke about it. But and that makes it feel more real because it is that type of thing where it's like you don't resent the person for it, but you recognize it. Like you recognize, that there's a bit of an imbalance here. But you will still help the person if they need the help.
Yeah, it seems like a very like healthy household, really. In a way, it seems like everyone's sort of expected to express themselves like in any way that they want, like artistically or in other ways. And it feels like everybody talks to each other. It doesn't feel like, a lot of the time in films like this, there's a lot of unresolved issues that tend to come out as things develop. And sure, there are there's a few little bits, and as soon as someone's become a deadite, they're going to say some nasty shit. They're going to say some nasty shit. I'm like, oh no,
lines, yeah,
yeah. So, in a way, but like, yeah, I really enjoyed the sort of, as you said, nuance of this and the reveal of the Necronomicon as well. Because again, I was like, how is this gonna come into it? I was like, they've gone out for pizza. Are they gonna like come back with it from the pizza from the pizza place? Like, I don't understand. But yeah, this was really interesting because there is something kind of like extra supernatural about it as well. Like the fact that it's an earthquake that sort of like rattles the building, splits open the parking garage, and makes a massive hole in it, which has got they dropped the pizza as well. I was pretty angry about that.
Yeah. And there's that line where the little girl says later on, she's like, oh, she dropped the pizza.
I don't know about you, but when she opened the pizza box, I was like, that's fine.
Yeah, there's only a couple flipped upside down. It's like you can still recover that.
That's fine. And I imagine like pizza that size in LA, they're gonna cost an arm and a leg. I'm not letting them go in any sense. Yeah. So yeah, there's like a hole that opens up, and I think that it's mentioned earlier that this used to be a bank, this building.
Yeah.
So, but again, I'm really fascinated about this stuff. Like, I'd love to see some sort of like prequel to this scenario. And I mean, I'm not the greatest fan of prequels. I think they can work, but it's fascinating, isn't it? Like, again, it doesn't make you feel like you need to see a prequel, but it makes you kind of curious about
how the Necronomicon think about it.
Yeah, I mean, I know we get a little bit of it because there are recordings and there's photos and there's texts and stuff, but the fact it's just there and it's just,
and we never really get a time period with those. So the priests and the audio recordings. Is there a time?
So I think on one of the recordings they say, "Oh, it's the year of our Lord, 1920 something."
So it's quite far back because even then it's like, okay, so that happened then, and they got those recordings then. But how did all of this end up in this bank? It's like like.
Did you also notice that they said one of 3 volumes of the Book of the Dead?
Oh yeah. So what the director said actually.
Okay. You've got some information.
There's 3 separate in the franchise. I think the original films have 1. What did he say? Then 2013 he's counting as a separate one.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is the 3rd book, I believe. Or I think he said, getting a bit confused now because I'm sure he said Army of Darkness is no, but that must be the same one from the original 3. So yeah, the original 3 remake and this one are 3 separate books. But I believe he did say they all exist in this world. So it's the same world, 3 different books. And that's just really interesting in itself, like just to think about. Cause it's like, oh, suddenly, then it goes back to that what you were saying about Sam Raimi kind of creating that kind of guideline for the franchise. Yeah. It's like, okay, we've got 3 books in this world. So what are the like key differences of these books, really? And obviously with this one, this book reminded me of the one, is it Prisoner of Azkaban, where he's fighting that book, Harry Potter. That's under the bed and it's got the teeth.
Oh, right.
It reminded me of that because this one's got like teeth on the end of it.
Yeah, it's got like teeth. I mean, this one, I think the most gnarly one is the 2013 one. I just feel like everything in that one is horrific. This one feels like, this one's pretty nasty as well. The fact that it's bound in human flesh and written in blood. I think anything about that is pretty nuts. But there's a couple of bits about the incantation, the fact that the words get spoke aloud that I really liked how this film dealt with that. Because one of the things I always think is like, just stop. Don't say it all. Or make it, or if there's a recording, just stop it if you feel unsure. And this one, the character tries to stop that like happening and physically can't, which I thought was really, really cool. Just like a really interesting way of doing it. But yeah, so sorry. So Danny jumps into the hole. there's loads of stuff in there. There's like religious artifacts, Jesus. I mean, that was a pretty good scare, to be honest. I was a bit like, yeah, Jesus just trying to headbutt you. And then obviously there's loads of crucifixes like hanging up, and the fact that it's like recorded on vinyl as well. I'm like, what are these priests got access to?
Yeah,
vinyl like processing thing, because it's quite a complicated process. But so yeah, and there's like two recordings of. I don't think it says what it is initially, does it? It's kind of just got dates on it, or
yeah. Just I think it just says literally 1 and then 2, just the order in which to play them. I think it's got written on them.
Yeah. And then there's like a photo of like some, but not much else. There's a few like documents as well. But Danny just like takes the book, up to his room, and is he pretty much just like immediately play it? I mean, I think what is happening, everybody else is just going about their business. Like Cassie like has a bath. She mentions that she's scared of water because she had a bad experience with a jellyfish one time, and then Beth makes a joke of it. I'm like, that's a bit harsh.
Yeah, you almost feel guilty when that moment happens. Like you're kind of playing with a traumatized like a child's trauma, and you're making a joke out of
it. Something about this film, like I just found that the lighting in this, like just in this apartment, just it felt so. It was even that was creepy, you know. Like I just thought, someone stick a light on. It's everything's so like dim.
dim and like kind of almost grimy and kind of like just
you know when you like
very unsettling.
If you go in someone's house and they've got like one tiny little lamp on, you're just like, let's put a big light on.
Yeah,
come on. Can't see what I'm doing. So yeah, that's kind of all happening, and Danny just starts. He's got to spin the actual record in order to make it play a decent. I don't exactly know why that is. I guess does his like system just not work correctly for it, or is it just because it's like really old or something? I don't know.
Potentially because it's old, I guess. I'm not too sure.
But it's quite nice that because it's like the actual act of it is almost like you're physically participating in this happening, and when it does get a bit spooky, and the incantation is being read aloud, and it does sound creepy. Because initially I was like, is the priest doing that voice? Can't they do it in a nicer voice? Like,
yeah.
You're really trying to scare.
It's got sound effects in the 1920s that they're putting onto it.
Yeah, it's like got reverb and everything coming on. But yeah, the fact that Danny tries to physically stop, like take the actual needle off the record, can't do it. Like actually turn off the power supply, can't do it. Like things are sparking, and so again, we know that there's something supernatural that is making this kind of happen.
And you get there's something about that. It must be one of my favorite filmmaking techniques in cinema. But just that's when that Sam Raimi signature shot outside of the apartment starts happening, and you see the camera raise up as it starts floating through the. Because that's it. Because Ellie's already left, isn't she? She's got her washing up, and she's going. Down in the elevator, and then we get the shot of the coming through the streets, and it's only like 3 shots. It's really quick. So there's like a brief shot of it moving. It cuts back to Danny. You're seeing it. And I love the sound design in that scene when the incantation is being read out. It's just very impactful. Like you really feel it. You almost feel like it rumbling through you as it's being read, and then it kind of cuts back and forth to that shot as it's kind of coming up. Yeah, and that's when it's Ellie when she comes up the lift.
Yeah, so it just flies directly. Do you feel like it would have just got whoever it saw first?
I think so, yeah. I think it's just looking for a host almost, and kind of. So, or it could have known that, you know, somehow that was the same household that the incantation's coming from, and it's like direct. Yeah.
So pretty much just like smashes. Oh, well, wait. Oh yeah, I was about to say she just gets knocked out and then she wakes up, but that does happen, and then she just gets. And this was very reminiscent, I guess, of Evil Dead 2013, where obviously instead of the vines and the thorny sort of thorn bush or whatever it is, this was like literal wires coming out of the like electrical wires coming out from the elevator and just grabbing each limb. I kind of liked the fact that she was almost like kind of fighting back in a way, and almost just like. It wasn't like she
had her agency a bit, and she was still trying to go up against it. And I just like that concept of visually of just taking, because I didn't even. It's one of those things where watching the film, I didn't really think that they were even going to try and translate that aspect of it, of like the tree and like the way the demon kind of enters the host, and then doing it with the wires and the. I thought it was a really smart way of just replicating that imagery in an urban setting of having it like twisted up by the wires of the lift, and I thought that was really cool.
Definitely. Again, another thing I didn't expect from it, but it's just those little subtle nods. I mean, you might not even consider them that subtle, but they're there and they do sort of make you think. The fact that it sort of like makes you think of the 2013 version as well as the older films as well.
Yeah,
I think is really good. So yeah, and it basically just grabs each one of her limbs and like breaks all of her bones. Is that pretty much?
Yeah, the one arm. I'm sure one arm gets bent right round, and she's like properly bent around with one arm.
Jesus. Yeah. So then there's a power. I think the power goes in the building around about this time as well, doesn't it? Pretty much.
Oh yeah.
So pretty much as soon as she's. Yeah. Sorry. Go on, man.
No, I was gonna say, yeah, I think that's when everything starts to go really bad then, because the earthquake's already happened, hasn't it? So the staircase is already gone. Now the lift is starting to become a bit messed up. And then is this? Oh, you get that really creepy shot when she comes up to the door, and the daughter starts to notice her in the doorway, and she stood.
Yeah.
But she's like stood, but her hips are like bent to the side a bit.
Yeah.
So and she's just walking in the house. And it's all very weird and like it's almost like the beginning of all the fun. And the film's really starting to go.
One of those shots again where you're kind of like, is someone stood there? Like initially, a bit like that shot in Hereditary when she's in the corner of the room, where you're like, you don't really notice it straight away. You're kind of looking at one thing, looking at another thing, and then you go, oh shit, oh yeah, I see.
So it's like
And I just found it really effective the way she changed direction as well. So she like starts coming towards them, and then she just goes straight into the kitchen like that.
And then you get that scene, which one thing I forgot to even mention in my review actually is the use of like split diopter shots throughout this film. Oh my god,
yes!
I thought there was like when they released, I think the first promo image they released was this scene where they're in the kitchen, and I thought that was just going to be the one. And there's actually loads throughout the whole film where they use it, but I thought it was really effective in this one because it's like it really allows you to capture the reaction of the family and the expression of her face as she's saying what she's saying. And one thing I really love about how this film handles the Deadites is you get like this, and I noticed it more on the second viewing, a constant like back and forth like battle for her body because she's talking as the Deadite in that moment, and then there's like brief moments where she comes back and she's like protect the kids or something like that, and it's like a back and forth. There's like not it was almost like an unsuccessful first attempt at a possession. Where then the Deadite's trying to fight for that complete control over her, and you get those little moments. And I thought the acting throughout that was really good.
Yeah, because usually in Evil Dead they let they use that as a manipulation tactic, don't they, to manipulate the person they're trying to kill or possess. Where they go, "Oh no, help me! Don't hurt me!" or something like that. Whereas this time it was almost like the actual person was allowed very briefly to just communicate as they were, and there are a few like attempts at manipulation, still, but yeah, the split. What was it again?
Is that split diopter? I believe it's called
right,
split
diopter. That's right. Yeah. When we did the trailer reaction, we couldn't remember what it was called. I don't understand why that's not used all the time in all films because it's so good. It's like so effective, and yeah, the multiple uses of it were really good. I hope you like eggs because that is exactly what. That's exactly we're talking a Rocky scenario here where how many eggs can you consume? Again, this was a scene from the trailer, but it was good to kind of see it play out as well. So Ellie just comes in and cracks on the frying pan and just starts slamming multiple eggs into there. And I don't know, I find this was kind of super creepy, wasn't it? Because the way everyone kind of just comes into the kitchen, just like, what the hell's going on?
Yeah, and it's almost like the Deadite trying to mimic human behavior, like in a really, just very jarring way, where it's just very like stiff and just slamming eggs down, slamming eggs down, and talking. And I thought it was really effective. And like I said, that split diopter shot, I think, really just made it much. It took what could have been a very basic scene and almost made it kind of like feel. I don't want to say iconic's the wrong word, but like just very engrossing in a way where it's very memorable. Like like if that was just shot in a very basic traditional way, I don't think it would have had the same impact. But when you're like, and it's the laugh she does in that scene as well was really creepy. She has a really creepy laugh when she's talking, and it's like, it reminded me of the laugh that Lupita Nyong'o did in Us, because it felt like it was causing quite a strain on her voice as she was doing it. But I really like that, and
like there's something about Alyssa Sutherland's look that just really sort of, I don't know, like obviously she's clearly a very attractive woman. However, it's very easy for her to suddenly just become this kind of like like I think it's just maybe the smile, maybe her smile, something about
I think
that.
she's her facial features. I think she's like her jaw, and like I think she's got like a very model. I think she used to be a model, but she's got a very model-like face with like chiseled jaw, and things like And so when you put that makeup on, and then she does those smiles or those kind of things, it really like brings out those features even more. But it really suits. I'm even looking at the image behind you, and like the smile on the face and the way it does that to the cheeks, and it really does have that kind of demonic look.
Yeah, and obviously we see plenty of like people possessed in movies and that, but I think when somebody really embodies it, the fact that she's got there's a lot of characterization she gets to do with this as well. And I've seen her post some behind the scenes images as well, and it seems like she had like a great time.
And that's something I really liked about her performance, is like it was a very physical one, and like she physically like she contorts her body a lot, and it's even in that scene actually, because actually no, it's not in that scene, it's in the scene after, but like she like moves her body around a lot in some very weird ways, that kind of just very unsettling, but like it's very impressive from an acting standpoint to see that she could kind of do that with her body to kind of convey kind of that struggle between like the real version of Ellie and
I guess like in these early stages, like that battle is really sort of clear, not just in the way she sort of vocalizes it, but also like her physical acting as well. And I mean, I don't know about you, I've got a bit of a weak stomach when it comes to vomit more so than anything else. So so this scene in particular was one where I was probably the first scene in the film where I was like, oh god, no.
It's like, here we go.
I just thought that's gonna take so much to clean up. That's all I kept thinking. It was just like, oh my god, that's gonna take like rolls and rolls of kitchen roll. It reminded me of do you remember Adam Sandler and Big Daddy? Whenever there was any sort of spillage, he was like, just put newspaper on. Just put newspaper on that. Just put newspaper on that. And I just kept thinking, that's gonna take a whole lot of newspaper.
And the second time I was watching it, I was thinking, I was like, is this like almost a representation? Like once again, the demon like really fighting hard to take over, and it's like literally turning your insides inside out, emptying your whole stomach, because it's like just trying to just get inside your soul. Like it's such a violation of someone to like try and take over them, and then to just empty them out like that, like in such a disgusting way.
What could that have represented? Could that have been like the dead like vomiting up like the last of her sort of humanity, or maybe almost, like the other way around? Or maybe the other way around, where
because I think after that scene is when she's then in the bath, I believe. Or no, how does she?
Yeah, I think it does move pretty quickly. So I think what we get here initially is like her body contorts and everything like that, and then she just starts attacking people. I think in this initial stage before the bath, is that right?
Does she? No, I think that comes after. So because that's what I like about this film. Oh yeah, because there's all that going on, isn't there?
Yeah, I think that happens pretty quick. No, so I think she vomits.
Oh yeah, of course, that is it. Because they think she's dead from that point. So then, like, she's on the bed. You then meet the neighbors, I think. No, you actually met the neighbors before when the earthquake happened, and they're looking for the kids.
Yeah, that's right. So there's
you get that funny shot where she's led on the bed with her eyes open, and they close her eyes because they think she's dead, and the eyes just pop back open again.
I'd just give up. I wouldn't try again. I'd just give up at that point. I'd be like, looks like she wants her eyes open. So yeah, in terms of so what I like about this is there's a lot of little hints to what's coming before. Now, as a horror connoisseur, which I think you've referred to yourself on Twitter, as well, I'm sure you definitely noticed these bits. But scissors being slid under the table, I was like, well, they're gonna come back. The neighbor saying he's got a shotgun. Well, we know that's gonna come out in a second, or a little bit later. So yeah, we're introduced as like a neighbor with a shotgun, and then like a cat in the neighbor's cat is always up in the vent,
and that's something I actually really appreciated about it watching the second time is how well the director set up all of those things. Like within the first 20 minutes of the film, you've like, and as a horror fan, you do know, like, you see everything. You're like, right, so that's there, this is here,
Yeah.
there's a vent there, there's this. He like just literally introduces all the things he's about to play around with early on, and then like
it's just
makes
like
you wonder
really,
how's that's going to come back
really
into
well
play.
like setting the scene, and I'm so glad that they all came back into it, because plenty of times you come out of a film and you go, oh, they kind of set up that with this, but it never paid off. But the fact that everything kind of like pays off and has its payoff. And the other neighbors, so there's like two kids who are they related to the guy who,
I believe so. I think that's
guy?
his sons, I think.
Yeah. So there's like
say it's his sons or something like that. But I think they're from the same household.
Yeah. So they clearly they want to hang out with, it's Bridget, isn't it?
Oh yeah, the daughter, yeah.
They seem like they're being nice. They said, "Do you want to come and watch it? We're going to watch all the Freddy films, including the bad ones." And he says, "There are no bad ones." I was kind of impressed. I'm like, that's a lot of films to commit to watching in like one night. But Bridget's not into it. I like the fact that we get the scene where she looks out of the little peephole and sees his like frustrated reaction.
Oh yeah, just
which kind of
showed
showed
bit
me
of character. Yeah,
that was good. And I think that's it for like the neighbors.
And that's really also like a little subtle setup for then how they use that later on as well, which I thought was pretty cool. Because once again, like the scissors, like a little introduction. There's a peephole here, and
yeah, it's just like establishing the like everything that's around, setting the scene, establishing all the key working components of that scene, and knowing that they'll all come into play. It almost feels like theater in a way, doesn't it? Like a sort of stage show where you just like, you know where everything is and where everyone's marker is. The fact it just takes place in one sort of small sort of place as well. So yeah, and then obviously after Ellie dies is when that character, I'm not sure what any of the neighbors.
How does she get back into the bath? I can't remember. Like, was there something that because she gets up? I remember she gets up when because Beth is talking to her and she's saying, basically kind of explaining to her, you know, I always come to you for the answers, and now you're not here. And then she gets up, and then the kids come back in, and oh, she's alive. And I think it then just cuts to her being in the bath, maybe.
Like I think they take her to the bath because she's burning up. I think they say.
Oh, so, yeah.
So I think we may be getting this a little bit wrong, and I don't think that's not anything bad about the film. It's just a lot happens in such a small
moves quick once the film starts moving, it just doesn't stop.
Yeah. So she sort of sits up. Obviously, Beth says to her, I can't believe I'm never going to speak to you again. They do that little prayer initially, don't they? Which is again a nice little character moment, especially for the older neighbor who I kind of thought maybe was not going to be into it, but he's like, yeah, hold your hand, let's get involved. let's do this prayer. Yeah, and then obviously the fly lands on her eye, and then that's when she blinks. Another moment from the trailer, and she just sits up, and everyone's confused. Obviously, Beth's just like, "Oh my god, she's just sat up," and all the kids run in like, "Oh my god, she's alive." And I think this is possibly where, so she just starts attacking people, and I think that it leads on to the bath scene, but you know, it may have not happened in that order. But yeah, so
what I liked about the bath scene was, because I can't remember how it starts, but like, I like the fact that when they put her in the bath, it's so clear that it's almost like, because do they put her? I think they put her in freezing cold water. I think that's what they say.
Yeah,
and it's so clear that like this demon from hell is not supposed to be in a cold, cold water, and it like rejects it straight away.
Yeah,
and I think that's when it then screams and then jumps up to the ceiling. Yeah,
like a cat,
and then.
Not that I've tried to put a cat in a bath, but like if the legs going all over the place.
Yeah, they'll do every single thing to try and not touch that water. But yeah,
and the fact that the water like starts boiling.
Yeah, that's what I liked about it, because that's what kind of conveyed it for me, was seeing the water start to sizzle. It's like, you just put this thing from hell in water, and it's not liking it, and it jumps up and screams, and then that's when it drops back into it. I think I love how that whole sequence plays out, actually, because she screams, and that's that really like ear-piercing scream.
Yeah.
And then just drops like planks, really, and drops straight back into the water.
The scream lasts for a long time as well, you know.
Yeah.
Like, they cover their ears, and I was a bit like, oh Jesus!
And it's still going, drops into the water, effective. And then that's when I feel like that's the moment where it's like the on your marks, get set, go, and the film starts. Then like properly gets going, because then I love the shot of like the hands coming out of the bath, and you see the face come up, and I think watching it the second time, like that was the moment where I really felt they've been going back and forth trying to fight for this body, and it's like now the Deadites won. Like this is the moment where the Deadites won, and this is the Deadite now. And then you see, I love that shot of just her eye. The makeup work is so good, like her eyes and the smile, and she kind of peeks up out of the bath. And I can't remember what she says, but then it's like very menacing then because it's like,
she says,
she's gone.
She says, "Mummy's with the maggots now."
Oh yeah,
which is
I think
which is a great line.
Already.
So I think she's got 2 great lines. I think, well, she's got plenty of great lines, but that was one of the best ones. I know I think we saw that in the promotional material.
Yeah,
but she does have another line a little bit later, which when she refers to the kids as, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
Well, so I think this is where she like essentially attacks and just starts coming at people. And this is one thing I kind of liked about the 2013 Evil Dead, is that when everyone was possessed by the Deadite, they all acted in a very different way. So there's not like one specific way for a Deadite to act. Like some of them are uber violent. Like if you remember I can't remember the one who chops her arm off with the turkey.
Oh yeah,
turkey. She's like very silent. She doesn't really say anything.
She's really creepy actually. Yeah, because she's just very demented looking, and then just with the nail gun or whatever, just firing away.
Yeah.
And just not actually saying anything. Like she looks like properly possessed in that film, because it's like there's just like hollow on the inside.
Yeah. So the Deadites just almost have their own sort of personality, or maybe they take on something from the personality of the person they're possessing. It's not like they are just strictly one thing, you know. And some of them like to just immediately kill. Some of them like to, as we mentioned already, shit talk. And some of them like to just sort of almost like play games in a way, isn't it? Like there's something very like sadistic about it, like that. But so yeah, but this is the thing, because it's their mum, they're obviously very unwilling to fight her. Essentially, they don't want to fight her. They're kind of like, just stop, don't hurt us. And she stabs. Just the fact that Beth gets like a knife through the hand, like straight away.
It's like straight into it. It's like that's almost like a third act type of thing you'd expect to happen with your main character, where it's like no, straight away, blade through the hand, we're getting going. Like we're starting
usually
now.
When something happens like that, you're like, okay, so now our protagonist is injured beyond, like they're not going to be all right now, they're going to be screwed. But the fact she gets that from the start is pretty insane. But again, maybe this is a nod to Ash as well, because I don't know if it's the same hand, but obviously he loses his hand I feel like it probably was like a subtle nod in some way. And then Ellie also like grabs a like tattoo gun, and she like shoves it into her like head first, doesn't she? Like into her temple.
Oh, but before that is when we get the line, actually. Because I can't remember what the daughter says, but then she says, and I've forgotten the line already now, all I remember is the titty sucking parasites, and that got a huge laugh at the premiere.
Oh my god!
And it's like
great.
You almost like there's gonna be that type of, there has to be a comedic line somewhere in an Evil Dead film from a Deadite.
Yeah,
because it's like, for me, growing up watching those films, I know The Exorcist did it as well, but for me, Evil Dead was the one which kind of popularized the demons talking shit, like saying outlandish things.
Just saying like the most horrible, demented stuff, and like the stuff that's really gonna hurt, like the people they're attacking.
Yeah, it's like
things
I'm not sure. Cut to the bone with words. Like
she says about killing them so she can be free of the.
That's it. She says, "I'm free now." And then I'm free from you.
Titty sucking parasites.
And then jumps on her daughter, with the tattoo needle right by the eye.
Yeah.
One interesting thing actually I recognised in this film, which originally I thought was a little disappointing, and then I kind of don't really care about it anymore, is a lot of the violent moments in the film seem like they were inspired by 2013, because that needle moment reminds me of the needle that literally goes into the guy's like eye in the bathroom scene with his girlfriend. And there's a couple other scenes later on, which I can't remember now, which like for me felt like a reference to 2013.
I think it never goes as far as 2013, does it? It kind of, it almost like hints that it's going to go as far as that, but I don't know whether it's because of the age of the people involved, or the fact that this is a family, that there's a bit of restraint, whereas the 2013 one was just like, look, we're just
Straight to it.
we're just going straight to it. And that guy, the guy gets a syringe in the eye. After watching it again recently, I'm like, he goes through it in that film. He gets
Oh yeah, he gets like by the end of it, he's like like you just want to die in that situation. Like, you know what, put me
yeah.
on my misery. Let me just go.
I think everything happens. So he gets like the needle in the eye, and he gets like stabbed repeatedly by that needle. He gets like shot with a nail
The
gun
nail
multiple
gun.
times. He gets hit. He gets hit over the head with that like crowbar
Yeah.
over and
Oh yeah,
over and
the
over again.
crowbar rips his hand in half as well, I think, as well,
Yeah.
and his hand's like split. And
And I'm like, and it was one of those where I'm like, oh well, he's dead. And then I think he sat up like, oh bloody hell.
yeah. And then right at the end, he comes back later on to save the main guy before then he gets killed for good. And yeah, he gets put through it.
He gets. There always seems to be a character like that who does get put through it, where you're just like, oh come on, give this guy a break. And I guess like, I mean, I don't know if you really get that in this film as such, because
I think they're all more likable. They're more like, yeah, I think because I think it's probably because they're younger as well. They kind of don't.
Yeah.
Because even like you would think one of the neighbors would be that type of character, but even the neighbors are they're not portrayed as bad people, so you're not looking to see them die in any way. So there isn't really that one person that you're like you want to see them.
You want to
get the worst.
You want to see him suffer. Yeah, you don't. But again, because of this family dynamic, and the fact is, like most of the time when you watch these films, you're kind of like along for the ride, and you want the carnage to keep dialing up, keep dialing up. Whereas this, I was constantly just like, oh no, who's going to survive? And the fact that they've got Cassie as well, who has got to be the youngest character in the Evil Dead history, right? There
and I thought she was really good, the actress. I thought like she
Yeah.
did a really good job, and it must be a credit to the direction as well, because I felt like this, especially like this type of film, is so crazy, and obviously there's certain elements of it they must not have shown her or made her aware of, but they still managed to direct her in a way, and she was still able to perform in a way where she almost had a grasp on the tone in a way where it's like, I don't know how you get someone that young to really understand what's going on around them, especially when they're clearly not seeing everything, to be able to perform the way she did.
Yeah. No, I agree. Look, right now, you get into this elevator. It's going to slowly fill up with blood. And now turn on this like that thing at the end to just basically kill your family.
Very brutal stuff for you. In fact, the funny story actually, the premiere, when the director was speaking at the end, he said that her parents were in the crowd watching it.
Oh wow!
This was the first time they were seeing the film, and he said they visited the set about 3 times. And he said when they came to visit, their daughter was clean, like, and then on the other days, it covered in blood. But it's quite interesting just the thought of you know, watching the film right now, and the parents are seeing their daughter for the first time in this film, and it's like, what's that like as an experience to see your daughter like in a film like this?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned before, like it did remind me of Aliens in a way, and the relationship between Beth and Cassie reminded me of that in a way, because it's almost like it is like a mother figure, but like an adopted mother figure, isn't it? Like the situation they're in has caused Beth to suddenly make that step up. Like, sure, she's probably never thought about being a mother before, but she's just become pregnant, so it's probably starting to become a realistic thing for her. And suddenly she's in this situation where this girl, this Cassie, who's 5, possibly 5 or 6, I reckon age wise, is like in her she's like her sole carer essentially, and it reminded me of Aliens in a way, because it was like this kid is in this situation, but I don't feel like she's like completely absolved of the danger. Like I think at any moment in Aliens you think Newt could just die, and obviously you've seen the film before, you know that she doesn't, not until the start of Alien 3, but you know that like she's in the water and the xenomorph comes up behind her. When they're in the room with the face hugger, you think it's very likely that this character could die in this scenario. And I felt like this with this film. I was like, I feel the peril, I feel the sort of danger that this character is in, and I almost like sympathize with Beth in this way, that she's been thrust into this first experience of motherhood, literally fighting for not just her life but also Cassie's life.
Yeah, and I thought that was like a really effective part of it that stood out, because kids rarely get put in that position in horror films. Like just any sort of position of peril, they usually just don't do it. It's almost like that taboo thing that just doesn't get. You don't harm children in films or put them in dangerous situations. Whereas this film really went for it in that way, where you kind of just, and even for the other ones, because they're still pretty young. Like the actors themselves are probably like, the other two actors were probably like adult age, maybe like 17, 18. But the characters, I think, were portrayed younger. So even to see the other two like in those situations, it was quite intense. And I think that's what helped raise the intensity, is because of how young they were. And it was quite different to see that situation. So even like with the tattoo, needle by the eye, it's like, this is quite serious. One thing I didn't understand about that, though, is she obviously then puts it to the side of her face, to the side of the daughter's face, and like draws something on her face. But how did like she become infected from that? Because she effectively becomes infected from the needle.
I mean, it's a weird one, isn't it? It's almost like, is the act of the Deadites committing violence on some... Because I've always felt this of Evil Dead. The rules of someone becoming a Deadite don't seem to be like specific to
they're
something.
not clear cut, are they?
It's not like a bite. It's not like there's obviously some vomiting of blood in there. I almost just feel like everyone could get possessed at any time, no matter what. And maybe perhaps the act of a Deadite committing violence on somebody else in a way has opened her up to be possessed, because
it almost makes them susceptible to it, almost like weakens the spirit or something like that, to then allow,
because Beth has obviously been on the receiving end of violence from Ellie as well, but she's not got possessed, which is why I worry about these films. I just worry that at any moment, you know, you think everyone's all right, and then suddenly the main character is going to turn around and be possessed. Obviously, which we get with Ash in 2. Is it just 2?
Where he has quite a few shots in those earlier ones where you literally. I remember I think in the first one, there's one of the women. There's that shot where she's talking, and it's quite normal, and then the voice starts going pretty weird, and all of a sudden she just turns around and looks at the camera, and it's just all Deadite.
So good. It's so good. It's effective. But I like the fact that they kind of lean into like the old yellow eyes thing of the Deadites, and slightly differently here, with like sort of like orangey hue eyes. And I guess that confirms that people are possessed, because we get that with the neighbors as well, like a little bit later. So I think what happens is
they somehow get her out of the house, but I can't remember how. Or out the apartment.
So it's I'm just trying to remember exactly what happens here. Oh yeah, we also get a cheese grater scenario coming up. Oh no, wait, that's when Bridget is possessed. Sorry, forget that. So after she attacks the family, they manage to lock her out of the apartment somehow. I'm not entirely sure.
I can't remember how. Oh, does she? I can't remember. But yeah, she's outside of there, and then that's when you get that great scene with the peephole, which I thought was such an effective way of doing it, because it's like, I like the restrained nature of, through this one perspective. I just like it when films do that. I find it very creative, where you get this restrained perspective, and we're gonna have all this stuff going on, and you get like a good mix of being able to see what she's doing, and then you have to imagine what she's doing when she's out the view, and like I think you get the shot of the kid getting like thrown into the wall. You get the guy come out with a shotgun, and then she walks off screen, and you hear stuff going on, and I thought that was all really well handled.
Yeah, because she gets shot off screen, doesn't she, Ellie?
Yeah.
a little bit later, I was like, oh, she's got like all blood down like
one side.
And that was obviously from the shotgun. But initially, I was a bit like, I kind of wanted all the neighbors to kind of last a bit longer, or maybe like get taken one by one. I thought, oh, getting killed. But by the time this like pays off, I was like really impressed. The fact that they had to a little bit later go through that corridor with all dead bodies around, where you know that like at any moment, some of them or all of them are going to turn. Everyone's going to turn, yeah.
And I think it's within that same scene, because I can't remember at what point it cuts, but then you do get the moment where, I don't know if this is much later on, or if it is in the same moment we're talking about now, where she then bites the eye out of the neighbor. She bites his eye and rips it off and spits it out into the kid's mouth, which is a very Evil Dead, crazy, stupid moment. And he like chokes to death on the eyeball, and then that's when she like kills them all. Like, but you do get that. At that one point, you do get that perspective shift out of the peephole to then see the action unfold properly.
Yeah.
But I can't remember what precisely.
Yeah, I don't know if it starts off out of there, and then they get back into the apartment and shut the door, and then they look through. But yeah, essentially we see everybody getting killed. But then Ellie starts to turn on her manipulation tactics in order to get back into the apartment. It never works out well, does it?
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what the others are doing, because it's just Cassie who basically.
I think this is when the two other children are then, because then this is when we see the other Deadite, which I think the way they shot the other one when she becomes possessed was really good, because she's obviously sat up on the countertop with her head just like looking up to the side, and it already straight away is like very odd, because it's like it almost looks like her neck's broken.
Yeah.
And
what
then
are you doing out there?
And then this is the other part actually that reminded me of Evil Dead 2013, because she's chewing on glass, and you get the reveal. And that reminds me of when the girl's hacking at her face with the glass and turns around.
It was a similar sort of angle to that, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
the way she
and the way the head turns and reveals is very similar. But then you get that shot of the glass in her throat, and she like swallows it, and you see it poke out the neck.
I think again, I think that shot's in the trailer, but you don't necessarily know what it is. You can
the context of it. Yeah,
see something poking out of the neck. I think around about now, Danny. Sorry, I was just going to say Danny also is explaining to Beth exactly how this has happened and what he thinks, and he's like sort of showing her the recordings of everything as well.
And he's like starting to take on the guilt as well, like saying this is actually my fault because it came from this. And I think at that point then Ellie's in the vents.
Yeah, Ellie's in the vents, and I think they sort of say, well, it could be the cat. Is it Ellie up there? So actually, I think Ellie gets up in the vents after she tries to get in via Cassie.
Oh yeah, because they stop her from getting in, don't they? Yeah, so they stop her from getting in. She goes up in the vents. Then this is when the other Deadite is having that scene, which of course is then like the cheese grater scene. Which
honestly, it's really difficult to work out the actual order of things, because
so much is happening all the time. But like it's weird. I don't know if this is just me, but the cheese grater thing, I feel like that's something that I've always wondered. Like, imagine if. Because you probably
faults.
I think it's where I've probably at some point caught my hand on it in a weird way and kind of removed some skin, and then you think, oh, what if it was the whole thing? And then this film gives you the answer of what it would be like on the back of your calf.
It's your intrusive thoughts, you know. Sometimes when you're doing a cheese, and you're getting right down to the end of it, you're like, there's hardly anything left. I can't keep going. I'm just gonna get my fingertips.
And then it's like, you take it too far. Film just provides the answer to what that would look like on human skin. And it's quite very sudden. It's so sudden.
It is so sudden. Yeah. So obviously with Bridget getting possessed, she gets all this black liquid like coming out of her mouth and nose, and then we kind of leave her alone for a while, and when they come back, she's up on the countertop eating glass, and has a tussle with Beth, which involves the cheese grater, which involves the cheese grater on the back of the calf as well, which is pretty horrific. And then when Bridget goes to attack Danny and Cassie as well, obviously we get a scene just before where Cassie's like, I'm scared that we're gonna die, and Danny's like, I'm not gonna let anything bad happen to you. Stephanie will protect us. That sort of thing. Stephanie's an absolute health hazard, like a massive horrible spike on the end at this stage.
Does she fight before that scene? Does Danny fight the Deadite before then, or is it after then? I get confused with the timeline again, because there's a moment where they're fighting and she stabs him through the hand. Yeah, so I think that happens. So they kill Bridget at this point with the staff. Oh yeah, Stephanie through the mouth, and obviously we get a great sequence of Bridget pulling the staff out of her head and then mouth. That's pretty brutal. And then she dies, and they tie her up and wrap her up in the bed, which is very like. I was thinking Michael Myers in Halloween, you know, when that was almost like a throwback to that, actually. Yeah. So they tie her up, little holes in the. Yeah. So yeah, they tie her up, and I think in terms of the order of things, this is when Danny informs Beth about the Book of the Dead, and she listens to the phonograph recordings. Now, I don't know about you, but sometimes when I've got headphones on, and I know other people are in the house, I can't fully relax because I'm thinking someone's going to sneak up on me here. Yeah, I could not fully listen
with headphones on to this recording if I knew deadites were knocking about. I'd just be
like
like,
in this situation, you just
one
wouldn't.
ear
You
at
need
least.
one ear for the awareness of what's going on around you. You wouldn't put both
Yeah.
on. Like
She's
in
like,
any,
I'm so
so drawn in.
engrossed.
And then that's when the kids walk out into the kitchen, isn't it? And then you see the deadite with the bedding or whatever on just walking behind them.
I think this might happen. Does it happen sort of like pretty much right off the back of the other, or maybe at the same time, where Ellie comes through the vent?
Yeah, very Hereditary style.
Very Hereditary.
That reminded me of Hereditary.
Yeah.
Like it's the layout of that shot and the way she comes in and the corner. Like I straight away, my mind went straight to Hereditary when I saw.
So it was very much like Hereditary, and then also the way that Beth sees the reflection of Ellie in the window was very much like Halloween Kills. Halloween Kills right at the end when the sister, the main character's sister, is sorry, daughter, not sister, daughter. Right at the end is in the Myers house, and then he's behind her, and then right at the end she sees his reflection.
The reflection in the window.
Again, it just I feel like it just reminds me so much of classic horror, but also of like the new school as well.
Yeah,
it seems
it's like
to
a
just
good
really
blend. And also it's elements where you don't even really know if the director was intentionally doing it. Like in a way, it's like, is that a reference or is that just coincidence? But either way, it works both ways. Like,
well, maybe is it a reference, but you know, sometimes if somebody's so well versed in like modern horror or like classic horror as well, these things will just come out naturally.
Natural influences, isn't it? Yeah, how you're influenced naturally by things. And the really weird thing about that scene that I find is because she grabs the vinyl after, doesn't she, Ellie? And like this, it's kind of really bizarre and creepy because she grabs the vinyl. I can't remember what she does with it, but her mouth just opens really wide, as if her mouth is like projecting what's being said on the vinyl. And it like freezes for a bit, and then it's just really bizarre. Like, it's so
she puts
bizarre
her
that's
finger
creepy
on it. Yeah, so she's got some sort of like amplified system in her body.
Yeah,
that is exactly the same as. Now I've only seen this because someone tweeted it, but it did remind me of this. Remember Lilo and Stitch?
Yes, yeah, I did just see that tweet. Yeah, it is. It's that. It's the demonic version of Lilo and Stitch.
Exactly. It's basically
that image of her with her mouth like a gape is just really creepy because it's like, that's bizarre.
Yeah,
like
but it works. It's almost like this analog audio stuff that we have in Evil Dead. Obviously, we've had tapes, and now vinyl. I just think it's like really. There is something about it. It's like from all this technology from, I want to say, a bygone era. Obviously, vinyl's popular now as well, but I don't know. It just leans nicely into the sort of horror,
creepiness
horror history.
Of, you know, like like getting history within that world, kind of detailed through vinyl. Very creepy.
Yeah. So there's, I think there's like two fights kind of happening together
at the same time.
Here. Yeah,
and what I like about the other Deadite that's fighting the Danny is the shot. There's a shot where he's like pinned against the counter, and is she floating? I want to say she's like floating because she looks like a goat, like your typical kind of bed sheet over the body looking ghost, because she's like floating and her arms are stretched like around him, and she's got the bed sheet thing on, and it's like hanging down, and just the imagery I liked really like a lot because it was very different. But just to see the Deadite like kind of lurking.
A stab in the arm there, like the bicep.
You almost see the muscle. I'm pretty sure in that shot you almost see, because it is like right between the muscle, and it just made me like, you almost quease because you feel like, oh, that's right between the actual muscle in the thing, and like, I can't imagine
anywhere is a nice place to get stabbed, but of all the places, that for some reason that feels pretty horrific. Yeah, and so then she stabs him in the chest as well, didn't he? And oh wait, Danny, he does light her on fire first, or kind of like afterwards, after he's been stabbed, actually. Because when he collapses, he speaks to Cassie, doesn't he? Can't remember exactly what he says, but this is the thing. Anytime anyone dies now, I'm just like, oh no.
Yeah,
you got a double tap, but that's the thing. It does kind of have, it is possession, but it does have like sort of like zombie rules as well, doesn't it? It's kind of like, even though
it's like the blend of the two, isn't it?
Yeah, you die once,
reanimate.
But then you are going to reanimate. Yeah. So when when Beth and Ellie are fighting after she comes down from the vent, and she does the vinyl trick as well. This is when we get the payoff for the scissors moment as well, where she's getting pinned to the ground by Ellie, and then Cassie shouts her and slides the scissors across. And initially I was like, I don't understand what's happened there, but I think she stabs her in the nose.
Yeah, through the nose. I thought it was up through the mouth initially.
Yeah,
like up to the roof of the mouth. But then she pulls it out of her nose, so it's like right up the nose, into the brain, or and
just the way
and she's just there like frozen, just like with the blood pouring out and the scissors just stuck up there.
Yeah. It's like when all these everyday household items just take on this new meaning just by the way that they're they're being used
in extreme situations.
Yeah, so basically just straight up now is that they decide to escape. We didn't even mention this, but the stairs, the reason they can't leave is because the elevator is obviously in a state of disrepair, and after a earthquake, not that this would stop you if there were possessed corpses about, but you're not supposed to use the elevator, a lift, sorry, in these circumstances. But also, yeah, the stairs they go down the stairwell and they're just completely gone from like 2 floors down, so you can't really jump because that's pretty dangerous as well. But again, that is very reminiscent of the road being destroyed in Evil Dead, and also in Evil Dead 2013 where there's just a flood and stops them leaving. So again, like you've been trapped in this place. Yeah, and what they're trying to, so basically they're trying to get into this abandoned apartment so that they can get to the fire escape. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah.
And
this is that's the scene where so they're in the corridor, and that's where you got all the dead bodies of the neighbors, and then Ellie's. Oh, this is where they have a confrontation with the shotgun. Because so Beth's got the shotgun, Ellie comes out, and I think she goes to shoot her, but then one of the neighbors comes alive and grabs her, and it makes her shot go a bit off, and she blows off Ellie's arm, I think.
Yeah.
And then her leg gets blown off, and then you get the cool shot of Ellie like lying down, but like looking hard to describe. She's lying down, but like looking upside down at Beth across the hall. So her head's like on the ground looking up. And then that's when you get the classic line, like she says to Beth, "Everybody dies by dawn, Beth." And then everyone else wakes up and they're all dead by dawn. And it's all very creepy looking, and then Beth's doing that laugh. And then there's a lot of really interesting images in that book, in the Necronomicon, in this one. And like even when the daughter gets possessed, because when the daughter gets possessed, the image that's attached to her looks like a squid or octopus kind of creature coming out of her mouth, but it turns out to be like the bugs or
the black stuff or whatever it was, like the symbiote stuff that comes out.
When it's in this scene, it's then the book of like the body joining together. And what I really like about this whole scene is how long the director holds on showing you what it looks like. So throughout this whole scene and where it goes, like you really don't see it until like the end of what it is, but you kind of know what you're expecting to see. And the first thing I thought of when seeing that image and then seeing what they did with it, I was like, this is The Last of Us Part 2. I don't know if you played The Last of Us Part 2.
Exactly the same.
I was like, this is the Rat King.
That's exactly. I leant over to my girlfriend and I said, "Color Out of Space meets the Rat King from The Last of Us Part 2 is what."
And then even like the location, when you think of they end up in the parking lot downstairs, same as The Last of Us, and like I had the opportunity to ask a question or try and ask a question at the premiere to the director, and I had nothing. And then when I left, I was like, that would have been my question, because I was like,
is this from The Last of Us?
Yeah, and I felt like even if it wasn't consciously done, it was subconsciously done. He must have been playing, because when he would have been writing that film, it wouldn't have been too long after The Last of Us 2 came out. So I was like, that had to have been a reference point. And I think they've given the official name to that Deadite. It's called the Marauder. But that's the name that they've given.
It's serious final boss vibes, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it feels like a Resident Evil type of thing.
Well, it does,
on.
and it did remind me of Resident Evil in a way, because that parking lot is very reminiscent of the parking lot in Resident Evil 2. And
with the gate and everything. Yeah.
The gate is exactly the same. It almost looks like, I feel like the lighting's exactly the same. I think even some of the again, it's quite a
car placement and stuff like that. Like just the way things are laid out.
And it did feel like Last of Us 2, because when the Rat King is revealed, he's revealed in a very similar way. I say he, like I'm giving a gender to this Rat King. The Rat Kings are revealed in a similar way, where you kind of just hear something, you see something like scuttle off in the direction of that way, and then you see a shadow of something, and it isn't until it's right there in front of you that you physically see what this is.
The full reveal of what it is. Very, and obviously, well, because we're going too far ahead, we obviously get the elevator scene before that, when they go into the elevator scene. Yeah, so before they get down to the parking lot, which
so the only thing that was stopping the elevator was like something in the way of the what was it?
And like Evil Dead for me, the franchise has been, when I was younger, my favorite. Well, in general now, when I think about it, it's my favorite horror franchise overall. But the first film was my favorite horror film for a very long time, and I think the film that overtook it at the time, I think, was It Follows. When I saw that, I think that jumped up to my number one. But my favorite horror film of all time now is The Shining. So for me to see this elevator scene, it was almost like my very first favorite horror film combining with my current favorite horror film. And it was almost like a passing of the torch visually through the film to see The Shining referenced in this film. And like
that moment has been referenced in so many things, and I'm like, it's just one. I think it's got to be one of the most iconic horror moments, because, I mean, obviously you've mentioned that it happens in this film, but does it happen in Doctor Sleep as well? Do we get pretty much the same moment?
I think they replicate it, and I think the first time I probably would have ever seen it was in the Simpsons episode. They did do it in the Simpsons episode, didn't they?
Oh man, yeah.
So I think, and that's the funny thing. I think that was my introduction to The Shining in general, was the Simpsons.
Yeah, I honestly think I might be the same. I think so many things in the Simpsons where I'm like, hang on a minute, this is from the Simpsons. It's like
Simpsons,
no.
and it's like, oh wait, the Simpsons is referencing stuff.
Simpsons reference this, and it also, have you seen, Ready Player One gets the scene as well. Yeah,
whole scene in that, which is, I find that interesting in Ready Player One, just in the thought process of having Spielberg recreate a scene like that, like someone as highly regarded as Spielberg playing with Kubrick's kind of vision of that.
But the fact that this I love this scene, because it's The Shining, but at this point I was really starting to feel Aliens. It wasn't just the visuals, but the soundtrack. There was that really metallic slash mechanic, like clunk, like in the soundtrack. I'm sure I'm just describing that terribly, but there was something about that. And the action, as the action ramped up, the soundtrack was like that, very much Aliens. The way she scoops up Cassie as the lift is filling with blood, and they're kind of like,
and it's the act of them kind of being in that liquid, isn't it? It's almost like the scene from Aliens where they're kind of walking through it, and the xenomorph comes back. And that was actually something that someone brought up in the Q&A, actually, is they started to talk about references, and the director thought he meant references to Evil Dead, and then the person starts to list off Aliens and things, and he's like, oh, we're talking about other films. And that was one of the first ones that someone mentioned, was Aliens, and like the whole Newt kind of thing going on, because it really does very quickly kind of feel, and like you said before, it's almost like it transitions into this whole film. Beth has been fearful of motherhood and what journey she's gonna have to go on, and then suddenly it's like it's her and her niece, and she's got like no choice but to protect, because she's relied on her sister her whole life for the answers and the solutions, but now her sister is like the problem and now she's got to come up with the solution herself and kind of grow into that savior role.
And you've got to immediately grow into that savior role. It's not a case of like having some time to think about it. You've got to step up. So it was it's great. And obviously the fact when the lift opens, all the blood comes rushing out. I mean, it's just like it's just effective. I think it's just effective. If we can have a blood-filled lift in any film, I think it would improve it slightly. And obviously,
one of those references that I never get tired of as well. It's like, even though it's been overdone, it's like, no, I'll always like to see a bloody elevator sequence in something.
Yeah, definitely. And that's obviously where most of the blood budget probably went to, which was that. Well, also, previously, when, again, we're talking about the little breadcrumbs being left, scissors, shotgun, all the other things. Another one was the neighbor saying he was a tree surgeon and that all of his gear was downstairs in the parking lot. I mean, it's pretty obvious. I don't know about you, but I was like, that's got to be where the chainsaw is.
Yeah.
That's got to be it. Because you see the chainsaw, because there's two like almost iconic lifting of weapon shots, aren't there? There's like there's a big shotgun shot like that with Beth, and then there's another one with the chainsaw. And neither of these had happened yet, so I was like, oh, what's gonna happen down here? So Cassie obviously is unconscious as well, so Beth has to literally bring her back to life. Bring her back to life, or maybe just wake her up. I can't remember.
And she feels like she's dead. I think she says, "Oh, am I in heaven?"
Oh yeah, she does say that, doesn't she? Well, if you're in heaven, I've got some bad news because it's pretty horrible. It's pretty horrible down here. So yeah, they're trying to escape. They go and jump into the car, and the car stops.
The gate's not opening. The gate. They're trying to use the little control thing to open the gate, and it's not opening.
When that happens in a game, when anything like that happens in a game, where you're like, right, I'm finally escaping. I'm in the car, and then you realize that you've got to make another journey, like to somewhere to grab something. You're like,
this is where the final boss is gonna emerge.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I've recently played through the remakes of 2, 3, 4, and Village, and it is just such a final boss moment, like a final form moment where you're just like, I've killed that thing, it's exploded, it's fine, I've burnt it to death, it's definitely not going to come back. And then right before the final like escape is when the like final,
so you can almost sense the euphoria when they're in that car thinking we've done it, and it's like, nope.
Yeah,
and then I think you get the shot of like the door just shutting, and they're like, oh, it's already in the room. And you get like these really close shots of like one limb like scurrying across the floor, little shadow of it just running across. And I like that because I think sometimes, although they do eventually show it, and even though when they do show it, they don't show it that much. But I think a lot of film, or it's one thing I usually don't like in my horror films, is if you got a creature like that, is just showing it off too much, because it kind of doesn't become scary. But I like that the director was restrained enough to hide it for as long as possible until you had to see it.
I don't think you could I mean, it's one of those things. If I had to like sketch it, I probably would struggle. I'd be like, okay, well, it's kind of like the mum, and then they're either side, but like you don't ever get like a real decent look at
the whole thing at once.
The whole thing. Yeah. And obviously they'd nearly get away as well. The fact that they roll under the open grate and then Cassie just gets like
yanked,
slurped off back that way, like a real Indiana Jones moment but she forgets her hat and and she has to go back in. And obviously initially she can't like get in, and I can't remember exactly how does she get back in?
She's trying to bust like there's the bit to the side of the gate. She's like busting that down with the shotgun, I think. Yeah, she's like banging it into it.
Yeah, and then the abomination. That's what it's listed as on Wikipedia. But what did you say? The Marauder.
The Marauder is what he called it in an interview. Yeah.
Is there is a Marauder like an enemy in some sort of game? It sounds like it.
I feel like that does sound like a name I recognize, and it also sounds like the type of name that would be given to some sort of like Viking type.
I feel like I know what it is. I swear it's in Doom Eternal.
That like does sound like it's ringing a bell.
It's
that
like
does sound like something from Doom.
Yeah, it's like the one you can't shoot without, like, it always dodges everything. You've got to like stun it before you. Yeah, it is Marauder. Doom Eternal. It's the one with the axe. I don't know if have you played Doom Eternal?
I've played some of it, but I haven't played all of it.
Yeah, there's like a character. There's like a enemy, which has got like a sort of glowing axe thing, and it dodges all you. It's like one of the supposedly most difficult ones to fight.
Types.
Yeah. So yeah, the Marauder tries to kill Cassie like with a chainsaw. I can't remember. Is she the first one? Is the creature the first one to use the chainsaw, or is Beth tried to use it before? I'm not sure. But essentially,
she's the first, I think, because that's the first time we see it. I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got essentially there's like a massive wood chipper that like kicks into gear as well, which is pretty horrific. So we get shotgun. She uses the shotgun a few times when she's fighting the Marauder.
And the Marauder is trying to like drag her into the wood chipper, I believe. She's trying to throw her.
And this is
it is the Marauder that like turns it. Well, I guess she doesn't turn it on, but trying to drag her into it.
Trying to drag her into it, and Cassie even helps.
Yeah, and then that's when you get the moment of the. Well, you know, actually, no, yeah, she does shoot her with the shotgun first. Then you get the moment of her picking up the chainsaw.
Yeah,
and
it's not as iconic as the 2013 chainsaw moment, I think it's tough to beat, you know, in a situation where it's literally raining blood and you're jamming and the Deadite has tried to mock you by saying, I'll swallow your soul and just swallow this motherfucker.
And I think this is another moment where I felt, oh yeah, this is just mimicking 2013 again, because it's like, so it's what was it? It was the glass we had earlier with the cutting of the face and eating glass. What was the other scene earlier on? Can't remember it already.
We said about the needle almost.
Oh yeah, the needle, and then you got this chainsaw thing, and it's like chainsaw's nothing new in Evil Dead, but it's the way this scene goes. It's like it's the same because it's jamming a chainsaw like into the face and like getting covered in blood. So like I don't mind it, but I remember when I was first watching, I'm like, oh, this feels a bit too similar. Like it's like it doesn't feel fresh enough, but it's still very cool effects and gore. And
yeah, I think they could have easily like made the most of the wood chipper and not even had a chainsaw. However, I think the chainsaw's so like affiliated with Evil Dead that they obviously like had to be in there somewhere. Yeah.
And they couldn't get the car. So the director said at the Q&A they couldn't get the car into the film in a logistical way. So the color of the car is the color of the chainsaw.
Oh, okay.
Same color. Yeah, so that kind of like.
Yeah. Okay, I like that. You could have thought the car could have just been in the garage somewhere, like maybe
in the background.
Yeah. Well, I still like that. I like the fact that Cassie helps as well. You know, because the wood chipper gets turned off, and then Beth says like, "Turn it on now." As
they team up.
a team up with a 5-year-old. That's kind of team up. And then Ellie's like severed head is all that's left. Basically, we see all of the other body parts and the other Deadite kids go into it. And then right at the end is when Ellie's decapitated head. I can't remember exactly what she says. She talks.
Yeah, there is a line of dialogue. I can't remember what it is, but then she
kicks her head straight into the wood chipper. Yeah, she panenkas it straight into the.
Yeah, literally.
Andrea Pirlo, straight into it. Which is great, but but there is a good. I like the fact that the human nature gets taken out of it a little bit before this, because even Cassie realizes that's not mum anymore. You know, it's not like anyone's going. This is another thing that I always feel a bit sad about. Like people who get possessed by the Deadite, they're done for. They're not going to be unpossessed.
It's almost like once it happens once, it's like it's over. There's no coming back. Has anyone ever? Trying to think, other than Ash, has anyone ever actually overcome and come back? I don't think they have. I feel like it's every single person at some point, you know, they might come back for a little bit, but they inevitably turn again. And
we never know what happens to Mia after 2013.
I'm assuming she.
Yeah. I always wanted like more of her story, you know. I think we mentioned it last week. We were talking about the actress who plays Mia. Like I think she was in Don't Breathe after that, but I kind of thought it was going to be a huge like moment for her as an actress, like in terms of being in more horror, but I don't think she's been in much at all.
Yeah, she's kind of Jane Levy's her name, isn't it?
Jane Levy.
She's
in
Don't Breathe, and I can't think I've seen her in anything else really since. But like
series,
her in Evil Dead, that's one of my favorite final girls in any horror film, because I think because she goes for it all in that film. She like starts off as the lead, becomes the Deadite, then becomes the final girl, and. And like we said, the way that the whole final scene in that film is orchestrated, I think, is just from the moment like the dead rise up from the ground at the climax of 2013, and then this blood rain and chainsaw, or she loses the arm as well because her arm gets crushed by the truck.
Oh yeah, of course. Oh yeah, that's horrible.
And she's like pulling it away, and it's literally
yeah. Oh, something horrific about
that. And there's one of the most impactful moments of 2013 is when she's in that like really narrow space, and I think is it a chainsaw or something? No, I think it's just a machete that's being like pulled through the wood, and one comes across her knee, and it gets pulled and like right across the top of the knee, just sliced. Like,
I mean, she doesn't go for it as much as that other dude, but it's pretty close. It's a pretty close run thing. That's pretty much it in terms of the story for Evil Dead Rise. Obviously, we do get like a little bit of a moment at the end which links it to the first scene. But yeah, so they essentially just escape, don't they? Cassie and Beth just drive out. I don't even know if we get a moment. Essentially, it's the next day after that, and this is when Jessica, the girl from the beginning who was ill in the cabin, arrives and is completely like oblivious to everything around her. Pretty
I
much.
found that quite
Initially.
funny. Like, it's like, oh, wait, there were other people like on these. It makes you think like, oh, the people on the other floor. How did they not know what was going on here? Like,
Yeah, I
the
know.
elevator going crazy. Like,
You come down and start your car in the morning. You're just like, why is there literally a river of blood
blood everywhere.
just down here?
And then you get like the iconic shot again from like all angles of just like the deadite cam. I'm just gonna call it, just zooming in on her. She's turning in every angle.
Are we thinking that just like the deadite spirit was just it came out of the body of Ellie and it was just like lurking around in this?
Yeah, I guess, or yeah, it's kind of that type of thing, or maybe like multiple spirits were kind of summoned from the book, and they were just kind of. Well, maybe it's to do with
the possibilities are endless, aren't they? The possibilities are,
and that's the thing with this franchise. I'm kind of glad they haven't milked it, but at the same time, this is one of those franchises where there actually is justifiable stories to make. Because I think the director said he had 3 from this one film, 3 ideas of where he could take it. He said about the priests, which I think would be a really cool thing to see, like what was going on with the priests, the continuation of this, and I can't remember what the other thing he said was. There was another element of the story that he could expand, but I can't remember. But there's that, and then there's, if you just think back to Army of Darkness and what that brought to the equation in terms of time travel and portals. It's like you can literally go 2100 way into the future and see what that's going on with the book, and how that, you know, you could do a Jason X type thing with Evil Dead if you wanted to, and it would make sense.
Space.
Yeah, like, or you could go back to older periods, like. But I think the story with and that's where Bruce Campbell's cameo is actually is he, the person on the recording that yells out to the priest. No, the priest on the recording that yells out. It's only a very quick line. That's Bruce Campbell's cameo.
Oh, it is. I didn't know that. So that's
yeah, I think that story is just quite interesting. Like, or quite interesting to think about is like what went on with these priests, with these books, 3 of them. How would like priests, if you think of what all they do in these films to try and like stop the Deadites, how would a priest back then, what would they be doing to try and stop?
Well, yeah, because the recording on the vinyl also says that he's tried to burn them.
It's like Resident Evil, isn't it? It's like an audio diary of a game.
Yeah.
Where you like hear that thing where or it's like the, you know, where like in the games where you get you see the dead body, you pick up the note, and it's like, why in their last moments would they be like, you imagine them with a pencil just writing out everything on a piece of paper just for the person that might find
someone's got to find this.
Yeah.
Or if you're going into a new area where there's a new enemy and you'll find like essentially the way to kill it in notes, wouldn't you? You'll be like, this, you've got to use the liquid nitrogen and then blow it away with a shotgun. Essentially, he says like the only thing that would essentially kill the Deadites is just completely obliterating their like limbs, essentially, I guess. Just taking them apart. So yeah, that is pretty much how it ends, with the spirit like coming straight toward Jessica and attacking her, and obviously that links to the first scene as well. That it gets out of this building, it goes out on a lovely little trip, and yeah, who knows like whether the next
doors
film
open
could
for the
potentially
future.
carry on.
So many avenues for them to go, which I find really intriguing. And like in some ways, when Bruce Campbell said about doing them more frequently, part of me was like, oh, but I think what makes Evil Dead so special is that we have had to wait so long. And I just hope that, I think there's more story potential, so this won't happen. But I hope they don't do the Scream thing, where I felt like Scream 5 came out and it's like, okay, it's been 10 years since Scream 4. And then a year later, Scream 6, it's like, wait, the whole thing with Scream is like, it makes a commentary on the state of horror. And it's like, we only had one last year. Like, what's happened in a year in horror for them to really talk about and make a commentary?
The only thing they do is they name drop Letterboxd. That's pretty much it,
yeah, so it's like, but I think with Evil Dead, there is so much more like meat on the bone for where they could do with the story that like you could like, it wouldn't feel forced for them to expand on it in like multiple ways, whether they did like a new TV show and like a new film.
Yeah, of course.
Or even a game. I'd like if they did like a game to explore, say, the priests, and like do it through a video game and let you play it.
Single player game, single player campaign. I feel like so much you can do with that. Okay, so that is Evil Dead Rise. This is the part of the show, Terrelle, where we usually play something called the name game. Andy is usually the guy who comes up with these. He sent me a few. I'm not usually as good as good at them, but I will explain how it works. So essentially, I'm going to give you a synopsis to a movie, which sounds very much like Evil Dead Rise. However, the synopsis will be slightly different, and the title will be slightly different as well. I'll give you an easy one to start with, so that hopefully it'll
hopefully it's easy.
It'll make sense.
I'm like,
I say hopefully it's easy, but I'm probably the worst person at this ever, even though I do it every week. So this film is a twisted tale of two estranged sisters whose reunion is cut short by the rise of flesh-possessing demons. But first, they decide to indulge in a bake-off.
Wait, is this a real film?
No.
Oh, right. I create the name.
I'm describing a film, and you give me the name. It sounds like Evil Dead Rise.
Wait, what was it again? Read it out again.
A twisted tale of two estranged sisters whose reunion is cut short by the rise of flesh-eating possessed demons. But first, the two engage in a bake-off. They make some baked goods together.
I'm thinking the cake rises. That's what I'm thinking of.
You're very close. You're very close. It's Evil Bread Rise.
Evil Bread is a good one.
I mean, I could have said something about the yeast, couldn't I? They're gonna get more complicated now, so I apologize in advance. Wait, I've written this down and I've not even managed to... Okay, here we go. A twisted tale of two estranged sisters whose reunion is cut short by the rise of flesh-possessed demons, one of which is wearing the skin of Homer Simpson's next-door neighbor.
Evil Ned Rise. Is that what it is?
You're so close. It's wearing the skin of Ned. Evil Ned.
Oh, my mind's gone blank.
It's not easy, man. It's not easy.
Evil Ned. Evil Ned dies.
Evil Ned disguise.
That's a good one.
That was mine. I like that one. Usually I would say I give all the credit to Andy, but that was mine. Okay, and then I'll only do a few more, I promise. Twisted tale of two estranged sisters whose reunion is cut short by the rise of flesh-possessing demons. But before that, they don't go for pizza. They go to a chain of baked goods, mainly famous in the UK, and get some meat-based pastry to eat. So a famous chain of baked goods from the UK, and they go and get themselves
something Greg's related.
It is something Greg's.
Evil Greg's. Wait,
pastry and meat.
Oh, mine's gone blank again.
I want to say this is my favorite part of the show, but it's not. My mind goes blank every time. It's Evil Greg's Pies.
Should have got that one. I'm disappointed with myself for not getting that one. I was trying to think. I was like, no, not sausage roll, not
And it's another food related one. This is the last one. This is from Andy. Andy says, he's given me an actual synopsis as well. Oh, there's two actually. I'm going to give you two more. I'm sorry. I nearly said it. A wicked woman named Megan is desperate to bump off her stepchildren, so she exclusively serves them food deeply cooked. I don't understand. A wicked woman named Megan is desperate to bump off her stepchildren, so she exclusively serves them potato-based deep-fried snacks. Aside. Her name's Megan.
Megan. Evil Meg. Fries. Yep.
Yes!
Yes! Got one.
Evil Meg Fries. Okay, and the last one. This is Andy's as well. A new podcast gives dishonest but engaging 15-minute presentations. I'm gonna not just say a podcast. I'm gonna say a talk. It's a guy on a stage giving a talk, but it's dishonest. It's evil. This talk that this guy is giving on stage.
Evil Ted Lies.
Yes.
Yes.
You got it.
I'm proud of myself for those two.
I've got about three more written down. I'm not gonna treat you to those because I don't even know where I would start. Sometimes I write them down and in my head I'm like, I know exactly what I mean by that, but then I come back to it at the end of the episode and I go, Nope.
forgotten. Yeah.
I don't remember for a second. Okay, so the last thing we've got to do, Terrelle, is rate the film. Standard A to F ratings, pluses and minuses are allowed. So I guess like where would you rate it, but also like where would it rank in terms of the Evil Dead franchise for you?
So I think I'll give it an A. Because for me, it does everything that I as a fan would want to see in an Evil Dead film in terms of like the energy of the film, the intensity, the kind of violence, the visceral nature. It does all of that really well. And I actually appreciate the fact that although it's tonally somewhere in the ballpark of 2013's Evil Dead, I kind of respect that it doesn't try and emulate it by just being outright violent and crazy like that one is. So it still manages to be its own thing and create like and that's something I really respect about the franchise. And what I love about it is, although all of the films are kind of connected in some way and they have an aesthetic that you know is Evil Dead and they have traits that you know this is Evil Dead, each film feels different in their own unique way. Like with the first film, you've kind of got your typical cabin in the woods kind of one. The second one's like almost like the remake of that with comedy, and it's very slapstick horror. And then the third one's like a straight up fantasy film with like the horror elements, but it feels like Clash of the Titans, like the old school ones. And then you've got the remake, which for me feels like the original vision for the original one, but like proper hardcore and fully like reimagined. And then you've got this one, which is kind of like a blend of kind of multiple elements. It's got parts of the comedy, but not too full on. It's got like the visceral nature of it, and then it's got like this story about kind of family in between. How I'd rank the franchise. So my favorite one's still the 2013 one, I think, because I've never seen a film like that. Like I even like 10 years later, I've still not seen a horror film like that, where it's like it knows what it is, and in terms of like the kind of gnarly, violent nature, it like just goes for it and just executes it. And like, and that film's just grown. Like I loved it when I first saw it back then, and like it's just grown on me even more over the 10 years. Number 2, I put Evil Dead 2. Because I just think that film once again is a film. There's nothing like it. Like in terms of like horror comedy, there's just nothing like that. Where like that film's just crazy.
I feel like that is like the quintessential Evil Dead film. That's when I think Evil Dead, I think that.
Because it marries the two elements of like horror and comedy like perfectly in that one. And the slapstick nature and the makeup effects and so many of the iconic things of Evil Dead came in that film, like in terms of like the imagery and things like that. And that's like the best film to like watch drunk or something like that, to like just like experience like a crazy film whilst not being sober. That's the one.
Because you're a fan of watching films while taking edibles, aren't you?
Yeah. And that is what that Evil Dead 2 is one of the films like I'd put the label on as like one of the best films to experience. Like because it's like it's maddening, but like in a good way. Like you just watch it and stuff's just happening. And
was your second?
Really
did you do that for your second go around on Evil Dead Rise?
I did it both times.
Oh, you did it both times.
Did both times, and like it was brilliant both times. Like it's because you just get wrapped up in the intensity of the film and. It really, really works. And like, third film I put Evil Dead Rise. So Evil Dead Rise I put after 2. And I think once again it's like it takes elements that I love about 13 and then just does new stuff, creates a new lore, very intriguing. And I think just that performance from Alyssa Sutherland is like, I think that's destined to be iconic because I think what she does with it, she is like not to say that the rest of the film is bad, but she's carrying this film with her performance. Like it all hinges on her in a way, because if that performance doesn't work, the whole rest of the film isn't going to work. And I think she really like steps up to it and really like does such a good job with the performance in Evil Dead Rise. And then after that, I'd have the original, which what I'll say is, despite the ranking of all of these films, I love them all anyway. So it's like, even though Army of Darkness I'd have in the last spot, I still really enjoy that film as well. They're all great films in my eyes. I think that's once again a rare thing to have a franchise where you could rank them all. But like even the one that's last, it's not a bad film, or it's not a film you dislike. You still really like it. But it's like,
well, yes. So I put my ranking out earlier on Twitter, and somebody commented saying this post gave me whiplash, and that was because I put The Evil Dead in last. Now, but I like that film. I love that film. But the fact is, I've ranked them. They're all so similar in terms of my love for them that I'm not ranking them and going, that one's awful, this one's great. there, and I think there aren't many horror franchises out there where every sort of installment, I mean, even like things like Ash versus Evil Dead as well, like is good. It's not like
Yeah.
it's not like tarnished the legacy of like these films. It's still great. So yeah.
That's the kind of thing, because like even though I've got the original at number 4 in my ranking, that used to be
Yeah.
my favorite horror film of all time.
Yeah.
So it's like it's still a film I love, but like it's just as time moves on, like these
Yeah.
other ones I appreciate for different reasons.
So similar. I'll go through my ranking as well. Very very similarly to you. I'm going to go for an A minus. I've only seen it once so far. I'd like to see it again. I feel like I'm going to appreciate it a lot more when I see it again. Great time though, you know, for probably one of my most anticipated films of the year. I'm glad that it lived up to that. Everything from that title card through to, and I kind of agree with you. I'm glad it didn't fully go down the route of uber violence. It kind of just went, we're still going to be violent, but you know, there is a family story to tell at the heart of it as well. So we're not, and again, those little nods to the 2013 one, nods to the other films, I appreciated that. But yeah, my ranking is Evil Dead 2 for me has always been number one because it is the most quintessential like Evil Dead experience for me. But then I feel like Evil Dead 2013 is also the most quintessential Evil Dead experience, but a completely different experience. They both work. They're both right up there in terms of their levels. I've gone for Evil Dead Rise 3, Army of Darkness 4, and Evil Dead 5, but they're all pretty close for me.
Yeah.
You know, they're all highly rated films. But yeah, I think A minus for me at the moment is fine. It might be one of those that I grow to appreciate more, but still that's a pretty high ranking for me, I think, on this, especially for a new film. Sometimes I come in a little bit unsure
Yeah,
for
like
that.
wait for the different viewings to see how they impact
Yeah, because
your
as you said,
thoughts.
with your second viewing, you picked up so much. There we go. Then that is Evil Dead Rise. So thanks so much for joining us, Terrelle. Where can our listeners find your stuff and keep up to speed with you? I will put everything in the show notes as well, so like the links to your podcast and things.
Yeah, so you can follow me on Twitter at Terrelle Graham, and then the podcast is called Mind of the Escapist, so you can search that up on Spotify or Apple Music. The YouTube channel is also called that as well, although I'm not as active on the YouTube channel, so the podcast is like the main spot, and I'll be doing frequent episodes on various things on there as well. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'll put all of that in the show notes. So please go and follow the podcast and everything. So you're covering more Evil Dead films next. Is that
Yeah,
right?
so my next episode is going to be me kind of going over in detail like each individual one, and kind of like just going more into detail with my history with each film and like the memories I have of them, because I have like memories attached to each one of like when I first saw it and
Yeah.
like the age I was and what that made me feel as a like horror fan and how they've like kind of influenced me as a horror fan. That's what I kind of look. I feel like horror fans have like such a personal like you have like an ownership over like your tastes and experiences with horror that are like very personal, and it's like I have so many memories attached to individual horror films of the time I saw it, the age, what that made me think about the genre as a whole, how that increased my interest in the genre, what I then watched afterwards because of that, or how I discovered this other film by the same filmmaker. Like I find there's just so many different avenues that you can kind of go down in the horror genre, which makes it always so fun to explore. And I think as I get older, I really appreciate like I'm like a sucker for nostalgia, and I really appreciate the things that I did when I was younger that you didn't really realize you would kind of look back on and be like, oh, that was cool. Like watching Evil Dead when you was 12 and that suddenly being like a big memory when you're older. And like when it comes to other horror films, like me and my friends when we were much younger, because we couldn't see it in the cinema, we used to get like copies of Saw every year on like DVD and would watch those, and it was always exciting every Halloween to watch the new Saw film, even though we were really young. And it's like having all these little things and little memories of what we used to do centered around horror. I find like really, it's just like a happy memories to look back on, and then kind of going back into that and thinking about it and talking about it. I find really interesting to just explore, because every horror fan you encounter has their own kind of story.
Yeah, they've all got like their different experiences, different story. And what I love about horror fans is that like they don't seem to like gatekeep things either, do they? Like whatever horror films you tend to like and whatever genres are your favorites, they kind of everyone seems to be in it together.
And they're more willing to share as well. They're more like interested to be like, oh, I've seen this. Have you seen it? Oh, you should check it out. More so than like judging you for not seeing something by a certain time.
Exactly. It's good. It's a good time to be a horror fan. It is a great time. Thanks everybody for listening. If you enjoyed the show, become a patron over at patreon.com/horror hangout. Thanks to our current patrons, including John Crinan, Ben Scaife, Stephen Christopher, Toby Miller, Lane Spencer, Ollie Child, Leslie Carlo, Julia Bilger, Nick Spill, Troy Birch, Rosalind Harnies, and Pazuzu. Thanks to Taj Easton for our theme music. Thanks to Acast for hosting the show. Please consider giving us a rating or review. Head over to the Facebook group Horror Hangout Board of Advisors for more. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Just search Horror Hangout Podcast. And next week, we're doing one of Terrelle's favorites, Tenebrae, with director Colin G. Cooper. So a big, nice Giallo fest. Colin G. Cooper, I did do an interview with him about his his Giallo short film, Bath Bomb. That is up on the feed at the moment as a bonus episode. So please go and check that out. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. We covered a hell of a lot, not just about Evil Dead Rise, but just about Evil Dead franchise and everything in between. Thanks again so much for joining us, Terrelle.
Oh, thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed that.
Nice one. And we'll see you again soon.
See you.
See you, everybody. Bye.